Egwene sat by the fire, staring up at the fragment of statue, but Perrin went down by the pool to be alone. Day was fading, and the night wind was already rising out of the east, ruffling the surface of the water. He took the axe from the loop on his belt and turned it over in his hands. The ashwood haft was as long as his arm, and smooth and cool to the touch. He hated it. He was ashamed of how proud he had been of the axe back in Emon's field, before he knew what he might be willing to do with it. "You hate her that much?" Elias said behind him. Startled, he jumped and half raised the axe before he saw who it was. Can you read my mind too? Like the wolves?" Elias cocked his head to one side and eyed him quizzically. "A blind man could read your face, boy. Well, speak up. Do you hate the girl? Despise her? That's it. You were ready to kill her because you despise her, always dragging her feet, holding you back with her womanish ways." "Egwene never dragged her feet in her life," he protested. "She always does her share. I don't despise her, I love her." He glared at Elias, daring him to laugh. "Not like that. I mean, she isn't like a sister, but she and Rand..." Blood and ashes. If the ravens caught us. If. I don't know. Yes, you do. If she had to choose her way of dying, which do you think she'd pick? One clean blow of your axe, or the way the animals we saw today died? I know which I'd take. I don't have any right to choose for her. You won't tell her, will you? About. His hands tightened on the axe haft. The muscles in his arms corded, heavy muscles for his age, built by long hours, swinging the hammer at Master Luhan's forge. For an instant he thought the thick wooden shaft would snap. "I hate this bloody thing," he growled. "I don't know what I'm doing with it, strutting around like some kind of fool. I couldn't have done it, you know. When it was all pretend and maybe, I could swagger and play as if I..." He sighed, his voice fading. "It's different now. I don't ever want to use it again. You'll use it." Perrin raised the axe to throw it in the pool, but Elias caught his wrist. "You'll use it, boy, and as long as you hate using it, you will use it more wisely than most men would. Wait, if ever you don't hate it any longer, then will be the time to throw it as far as you can and run the other way." Perrin hefted the axe in his hands, still tempted to leave it in the pool. Easy for him to say. Wait? What if I wait and then can't throw it away? He opened his mouth to ask Elias, but no words came out. Ascending from the wolves, so urgent that his eyes glazed over. For an instant he forgot what he had been going to say, forgot he had been going to say anything, forgot even how to speak, how to breathe. Elias's face sagged too, and his eyes seemed to peer inward and far away. Then it was gone, as quickly as it had come. It had only lasted a heartbeat, but that was enough. Perrin shook himself and filled his lungs deeply. Elias did not pause. As soon as the veil lifted from his eyes, he sped toward the fire without any hesitation. Perrin ran wordlessly behind him. "Douse the fire," Elias called hoarsely to Egwene. He gestured urgently, and he seemed to be trying to shout in a whisper. "Get it out!" She rose to her feet, staring at him uncertainly, then stepped closer to the fire, but slowly, clearly not understanding what was happening. Elias pushed roughly past her and snatched up the tea kettle, cursing when it burned him. Juggling the hot pot, he upended it over the fire just the same. A step behind him, Perrin arrived in time to start kicking dirt over the hissing coals as the last of the tea splashed into the fire, hissing and rising in tendrils of steam. He did not stop until the last vestige of the fire was buried. Elias tossed the kettle to Perrin, who immediately let it fall with a choked-off yell. Perrin blew on his hands, frowning at Elias, but the fur-clad man was too busy giving their campsite a hasty look to pay any attention. "No chance to hide that somebody's been here," Elias said. "We'll just have to hurry and hope. Maybe they won't bother." Blood and ashes, but I was sure it was the ravens. Hurriedly, Perrin tossed the saddle on Baylor, propping the axe against his thigh while he bent to tighten the girth. "What is it?" Egwene asked. Her voice shook. "Trollocs. A fade, go east or west," Elias told Perrin. "Find a place to hide, and I'll join you as soon as I can. If they see a wolf." He darted away, crouching almost as if he intended to go to all fours, and vanished into the lengthening shadows of evening. Egwene hastily gathered her few belongings, but she still demanded an explanation from Perrin. Her voice was insistent and growing more frightened by the minute as he kept silent. He was frightened too, but fear made them move faster. He waited until they were headed toward the setting sun, trotting ahead of Baela and holding the axe across his chest in both hands. He told what he knew over his shoulder in snatches, while hunting for a place to go to ground and wait for Elias. There are a lot of men coming, on horses. They came up behind the wolves, but the men didn't see them. They're heading toward the pool. Probably they don't have anything to do with us. It's the only water for miles. But Dapple says... He glanced over his shoulder. The evening sun painted odd shadows on her face, shadows that hid her expression. What is she thinking? Is she looking at you as if she doesn't know you anymore? Does she know you? Dapple says they smell wrong. It's sort of the way a rabid dog smells wrong. The pool was lost to sight behind them. He could still pick out boulders, fragments of Arthur Hawkwing's statue in the deepening twilight, but not to tell which was the stone where the fire had been. We'll stay away from them, find a place to wait for Elias. Why should they bother us? She demanded. We're supposed to be safe here. It's supposed to be safe. Light, there has to be someplace safe. Perrin began looking harder for somewhere to hide. They could not be very far from the pool, but the twilight was thickening. Soon it would be too dark to travel. Faint light still bathed the crests. From the hollows between, where there was barely enough to see, it seemed bright by contrast. Off to the left, a dark shape stood sharp against the sky, a large, flat stone slanting out of a hillside, cloaking the slope beneath in darkness. This way, he said. He trotted toward the hill, glancing over his shoulder for any sign of the men who were coming. There was nothing yet. More than once he had to stop and wait while the others stumbled after him. Egwene was crouched over Baela's neck, and the mare was picking her way carefully over the uneven ground. Perrin thought they both must be more tired than he had believed. This had better be a good hiding place. I don't think we can hunt for another. At the base of the hill he studied the massive, flat rock outlined against the sky, jutting out the slope almost at the crest. There was an odd familiarity to the way the top of the huge slab seemed to form irregular steps, 3 up and 1 down. He climbed the short distance and felt across the stone, walking along it. Despite the weathering of centuries, he could still feel 4 joined columns. He glanced up at the step-like top of the stone, towering over his head like a huge lean-to. Fingers. We'll shelter in Arthur Hawkwing's hand. Maybe some of his justice is left here. He motioned for Egwene to join him. She did not move, so he slid back down to the base of the hill and told her what he had found. Egwene peered up the hill with her head pushed forward. "How can you see anything?" she asked. Perrin opened his mouth, then shut it. He licked his lips as he looked around, for the first time really aware of what he was seeing. The sun was down, all the way down now, and clouds hid the full moon, but it still seemed like the deep purple fringes of twilight to him. "I felt the rock," he said finally. "That's what it has to be. They won't be able to pick us out against the shadow of it, even if they come this far." He took Baela's bridle to lead her to the shelter of the hand. He could feel Egwene's eyes on his back. As he was helping her down from the saddle, the knight broke out in shouts back toward the pool. She laid a hand on Perrin's arm, and he heard her unspoken question. "The men saw wind," he said reluctantly. It was difficult to pick out the meaning of the wolves' thoughts. Something about fire. "They have torches." He pressed her down at the base of the fingers and crouched beside her. "They're breaking up into parties to search. So many of them, and the wolves are all hurt." He tried to make his voice heartier. "But Dapple and the others should be able to keep out of their way, even injured, and they don't expect us. People don't see what they don't expect. They'll give up soon enough and make camp." Elias was with the wolves and would not leave them while they were hunted. So many riders. Now Taemen risen in the time. So persistent. Why so persistent? He saw Egwene nod, but in the dark she did not realize it. "We'll be all right, Perrin. Light," he thought wonderingly. "She's trying to comfort me." The shouts went on and on. Small knots of torches moved in the distance, flickering points of light in the darkness. "Perrin," Egwene said softly, "will you dance with me at Sunday?" "If we're home by then?" His shoulders shook. He made no sound, and he did not know if he was laughing or crying. "I will. I promise." Against his will, his hands tightened on the axe, reminding him that he still held it. His voice dropped to a whisper. "I promise," he said again, and hoped. Groups of torch-carrying men now rode through the hills, bunches of 10 or 12. Perrin could not tell how many groups there were. Sometimes 3 or 4 were in sight at once, quartering back and forth. They continued to shout to one another, and sometimes there were screams in the night, the screams of horses, the screams of men. He saw it all from more than one vantage. He crouched on the hillside with Egwene, watching the torches move through the darkness like fireflies, and in his mind he ran in the night with Dapple and Wind and Hopper. The wolves had been too hurt by the ravens to run far or fast, so they intended to drive the men out of the darkness, drive them to the shelter of their fires. Men always sought the safety of fires in the end. When wolves roamed the night, some of the mounted men led strings of horses without riders. They whinnied and reared with wide, rolling eyes when the grey shapes darted among them, screaming and pulling their lead ropes from the hands of the men who held them, scattering in all directions as fast as they could run. Horses with men on their backs screamed too when grey shadows flashed out of the dark with hamstringing fangs, and sometimes their riders screamed as well, just before jaws tore out their throats. Elias was out there also, more dimly sensed, stalking the night with his long knife, a 2-legged wolf with one sharp steel tooth. The shouts became curses more often than not, but the searchers refused to give up. Abruptly, Perrin realized that the men with torches were following a pattern. Each time some of the parties came in view, one of them, at least, was closer to the hillside where he and Egwene were hiding. Elias had said to hide, but what if we run? Maybe we could hide in the dark if we keep moving. Maybe. It has to be dark enough for that. He turned to Egwene, but as he did, the decision was taken away from him. Bunched torches, a dozen of them, came around the base of the hill, wavering with the trot of the horses. Lance heads gleamed in the torchlight. He froze, holding his breath, hands tightening on his axe haft. The horsemen rode past the hill, but one of the men shouted, and the torches swung back. He thought desperately, seeking for a way to go. But as soon as they moved, they would be seen, if they had not already been, and once they were marked, they would have no chance, not even with the darkness to help. The horsemen drew up at the foot of the hill, each man holding a torch in one hand and a long lance in the other, guiding his horse by the pressure of his knees. By the light of the torches, Perrin could see the white cloaks of the Children of the Light. They held the torches high and leaned forward in their saddles, peering up at the deep shadows under Artur Hawkwing's fingers. "There is something up there," one of them said. His voice was too loud, as if he was afraid of what lay outside the light of his torch. "I told you somebody could hide in that. Isn't that a horse?" Egwene laid a hand on Perrin's arm. Her eyes were big in the dark. Her silent question plain, despite the shadow, hiding her features. What to do? Elias and the wolves still hunted through the night. The horses below shifted their feet nervously. "If we run now, they'll chase us down." One of the Whitecloaks stepped his horse forward and shouted up the hill. "If you can understand human speech, come down and surrender. You'll not be harmed if you walk in the light. If you don't surrender, you will all be killed. You have 1 minute." The lances lowered, long steel heads bright with torchlight. "Perrin," Egwene whispered, "we can't outrun them. If we don't give up, they'll kill us." "Perrin?" Elias and the wolves were still free. Another distant, bubbling scream marked a Whitecloak who had hunted Dapple too closely. "If we run." Egwene was looking at him, waiting for him to tell her what to do. "If we run." He shook his head wearily and stood up like a man in a trance, stumbling down the hill toward the Children of the Light. He heard Egwene sigh and follow him, her feet dragging reluctantly. Why are the Whitecloaks so persistent, as if they hate wolves with a passion? Why do they smell wrong? He almost thought he could smell the wrongness himself when the wind gusted from the riders. "Drop that axe," the leader barked. Perrin stumbled toward him, wrinkling his nose to get rid of the smell he thought he smelt. "Drop it, bumpkin." The leader's lance shifted toward Perrin's chest. For a moment he stared at the lance head, enough sharp steel to go completely through him, and abruptly he shouted, "No!" It was not at the horseman he shouted. Out of the night Hopper came, and Perrin was one with the wolf. Hopper, the cub, who had watched the eagles soar, and wanted so badly to fly through the sky as the eagles did. The cub who hopped and jumped and leaped until he could leap higher than any other wolf, and who never lost the cub's yearning to soar through the sky. Out of the night Hopper came and left the ground in a leap, soaring like the eagles. The Whitecloaks had only a moment to begin cursing before Hopper's jaws closed on the throat of the man with his lance leveled at Perrin. The big wolf's momentum carried them both off the other side of the horse. Perrin felt the throat crushing, tasted the blood. Hopper landed lightly, already apart from the man he had killed. Blood matted his fur, his own blood, and that of others. A gash down his face crossed the empty socket where his left eye had been. His good eye met Perrin's too for just an instant. "Run, brother." He whirled to leap again, to soar one last time, and a lance pinned him to the earth. A second length of steel thrust through his ribs, driving into the ground under him. Kicking, he snapped at the shafts that held him. To soar. Pain filled Perrin, and he screamed, a wordless scream that had something of a wolf's cry in it. Without thinking, he leaped forward, still screaming. All thought was gone. The horsemen had bunched too much to be able to use their lances, and the axe was a feather in his hands, one huge wolf's tooth of steel. Something crashed into his head, and as he fell, he did not know if it was Hopper or himself who died. Soar like the eagles. Mumbling, Perrin opened his eyes woozily. His head hurt, and he could not remember why. Blinking against the light, he looked around. Egwene was kneeling and watching him where he lay. They were in a square tent as big as a medium-sized room in a farmhouse, with a ground cloth for a floor. Oil lamps on tall stands, one in each corner, gave a bright light. "Thank the light, Perrin," she breathed. "I was afraid they had killed you." Instead of answering, he stared at the grey-haired man seated in the lone chair in the tent. A dark-eyed, grandfatherly face looked back at him, a face at odds in his mind with the white and gold tabard the man wore, and the burnished armor strapped over his pure white undercoat. It seemed a kindly face, bluff and dignified, and something about it fit the elegant austerity of the tent's furnishings. A table and a folding bed, a washstand with a plain white basin and pitcher, a single wooden chest inlaid in simple geometric patterns. Where there was wood, it was polished to a soft glow, and the metal gleamed, but not too brightly, and nothing was showy. Everything in the tent had the look of craftsmanship, but only someone who had watched the work of craftsmen like Master Luhan or Master Aybara, the cabinet maker, would see it. Frowning, the man stirred two small piles of objects on the table with a blunt finger. Perrin recognized the contents of his pockets in one of those piles and his belt knife. The silver coin Moiraine had given him toppled out, and the man pushed it back thoughtfully. Pursing his lips, he left the piles and lifted Perrin's axe from the table, hefting it. His attention came back to the Eamon's fielders. Perrin tried to get up. Sharp pain stabbing along his arms and legs turned the movement into a flop. For the first time, he realized that he was tied, hand and foot. His eyes went to Egwene. She shrugged ruefully and twisted so that he could see her back. Half a dozen lashings wrapped her wrists and ankles, the cords making ridges in her flesh. A length of rope ran between the bonds around ankles and wrists, short enough to stop her from straightening to more than a crouch if she got to her feet. Perrin stared. That they were tied was shock enough, but they wore enough ropes to hold horses. What do they think we are? The grey-haired man watched them, curious and thoughtful, like Master Olvir puzzling out a problem. He held the axe as if he had forgotten it. The tent flap shifted aside, and a tall man stepped into the tent. His face was long and gaunt, with eyes so deeply set they seemed to look out from caves. There was no excess flesh on him, no fat at all. His skin was pulled tight over the muscle and bone beneath. Perrin had a glimpse of night outside, and campfires, and two white-cloaked guards at the entrance of the tent. Then the flap fell back into place. As soon as the newcomer was into the tent, he stopped, standing as rigid as an iron rod, staring straight ahead of him at the far wall of the tent. His plate and mail armor gleamed like silver against his snowy cloak and undercoat. "My Lord Captain." His voice was as hard as his posture, and grating but somehow flat, without expression. The grey-haired man made a casual gesture. "Be at your ease, child buyer. You have tallied our costs for this." "Encounter?" The tall man moved his feet apart, but other than that, Perrin did not see anything ease about his stance. 9 men dead, my Lord Captain, and 23 injured, 7 seriously. All can ride, though. 30 horses had to be put down. They were hamstrung. He emphasized that in his emotionless voice, as if what had happened to the horses were worse than the deaths and injuries to men. Many of the remounts are scattered. We may find some at daybreak, my Lord Captain, but with wolves to send them on their way, it will take days to gather them all. The men who were supposed to be watching them have been assigned to night guard until we reach Caemlyn. We do not have days, child buyer, the grey-haired man said mildly. We ride at dawn. Nothing can change that. We must be in Caemlyn in time, yes? As you command, my lord captain. The grey-haired man glanced at Perrin and Egwene, then away again. And what have we to show for it, aside from these two younglings? Buyer drew a deep breath and hesitated. I've had the wolf that was with this lot skinned, my lord captain. The hide should make a fine rug for my lord captain's tent. Hopper, not even realizing what he was doing, Perrin growled and struggled against his bonds. The ropes dug into his skin, his wrists became slippery with blood, but they did not give. For the first time, Buyer looked at the prisoners. Egwene started back from him. His face was as expressionless as his voice, but a cruel light burned in his sunken eyes, as surely as flames burned in Baalzamon's. Buyer hated them as if they were enemies of long years, instead of people never seen before tonight. Perrin stared back defiantly. His mouth curled into a tight smile at the thought of his teeth meeting in the man's throat. Abruptly his smile faded, and he shook himself. My teeth. I'm a man, not a wolf. Light, there has to be an end to this. But he still met Buyer's glare, hate for hate. I do not care about wolf-hide rugs, child Buyer. The rebuke in the Lord Captain's voice was gentle, but Buyer's back snapped rigid again, his eyes locking to the wall of the tent. You were reporting on what we achieved this night, no? If we achieved anything. Lord Captain's voice was gentle, but Buyer's back snapped rigid again, his eyes locking to the wall of the tent. You were reporting on what we achieved this night, no? If we achieved anything. I would estimate the pack that attacked us at 50 beasts or more, my Lord Captain. Of that, we killed at least 20, perhaps 30. I did not consider it worth the risk of losing more horses to have the carcasses brought in tonight. In the morning I will have them gathered and burned, those that aren't dragged off in the dark. Besides these two, there were at least a dozen other men. I believe we disposed of 4 or 5, but it is unlikely we will find any bodies, given the Darkfriends' propensity for carrying away their dead to hide their losses. This seems to have been a coordinated ambush, but that raises the question of... Perrin's throat tightened as the gaunt man went on. Elias. Cautiously, reluctantly, he felt for Elias, for the wolves, and found nothing. It was as if he had never been able to feel a wolf's mind. Either they're dead, or they've abandoned you. He wanted to laugh, a bitter laugh. At last he had what he had been wishing for, but the price was high. The grey-haired man did laugh just then, a rich, wry chuckle that made a red spot bloom on each of Buyer's cheeks. So, child Buyer, it is your considered estimate that we were attacked in a planned ambush by upwards of 50 wolves and better than half a score of Darkfriends? Yes, perhaps when you've seen a few more actions. But, my Lord Captain Bornhold, I would say 6 or 8 wolves, child Buyer, and perhaps no other humans than these two. You have the true zeal but no experience outside the cities. It is a different thing, bringing the light when streets and houses are far distant. Wolves have a way of seeming more than they are in the night, and men also. 6 or 8 at most, I think. Buyer's flush deepened slowly. I also suspect they were here for the same reason we are, the only easy water for at least a day in any direction. A much simpler explanation than spies or traitors within the children, and the simplest explanation is usually the truest. You will learn with experience. Buyer's face went deathly white as the grandfatherly man spoke. By contrast, the 2 spots in his hollow cheeks deepened from red to purple. He cut his eyes toward the 2 prisoners for an instant. He hates us even more now, Perrin thought, for hearing this. But why did he hate us in the first place? What do you think of this? The Lord Captain said, holding up Perrin's axe. Buyer looked a question at his commander and waited for an answering nod before he broke his rigid stance to take the weapon. He hefted the axe and gave a surprised grunt, then whirled it in a tight arc above his head that barely missed the top of the tent. He handled it as surely as if he had been born with an axe in his hands. A look of grudging admiration flickered across his face, but by the time he lowered the axe, he was expressionless once more. Excellently balanced, my Lord Captain. Plainly made, but by a very good weaponsmith, perhaps even a master. His eyes burned darkly at the prisoners. Not a villager's weapon, my Lord Captain, nor a farmer's. No, The grey-haired man turned toward Perrin and Egwene with a weary, slightly chiding smile, a kindly grandfather who knew his grandchildren had been up to some mischief. "My name is Geoffrey Bornhold," he told them. "You are Perrin, I understand. But you, young woman, what is your name?" Perrin glowered at him, but Egwene shook her head. "Don't be silly, Perrin. I'm Egwene. Just Perrin, and just Egwene," Bornhold murmured. "But I suppose if you truly are Darkfriends, you wish to hide your identities as much as possible." Perrin heaved himself up to his knees. He could rise no further because of the way he was bound. "We aren't Darkfriends," he protested angrily. The words were not completely out of his mouth before Baia reached him. The man moved like a snake. He saw the handle of his own axe swinging toward him and tried to duck, but the thick haft caught him over the ear. Only the fact that he was moving away from the blow kept his skull from being split. Even so, lights flashed in his eyes. Breath left him as he struck the ground. His head wrung, and blood ran down his cheek. "You have no right," Egwene began, and screamed as the axe handle whipped toward her. She threw herself aside, and the blow whistled through empty air as she tumbled to the ground cloth. "You will keep a civil tongue," Baia said when speaking to an anointed of the light, "or you will have no tongue." The worst of it was his voice still had no emotion at all. Cutting out their tongues would give him no pleasure and no regret. It was just something he would do. "Go easy, child Baia." Bornhold looked at the captives again. "I expect you do not know much about the Anointed, or about Lords Captain of the Children of the Light, do you?" "No, I thought not." "Well, for child Baia's sake at least try not to argue or shout, yes? I want no more than that you should walk in the light, and letting anger get the better of you won't help any of us." Perrin looked up at the gaunt-faced man standing over them. For child Baia's sake, he noticed that the Lord Captain did not tell Baia to leave them alone. Baia met his eyes and smiled. The smile touched only his mouth, but the skin of his face drew tighter until it looked like a skull. Perrin shivered. "I have heard of this thing of men running with wolves," Bornhold said musingly, "though I have not seen it before. Men supposedly talking with wolves and with other creatures of the Dark One. A filthy business. It makes me fear the last battle is indeed coming soon. Wolves aren't." Perrin cut off as Baia's boot drew back. Taking a deep breath, he went on in a milder tone. Baia lowered his foot with a disappointed grimace. "Wolves aren't creatures of the Dark One. They hate the Dark One. At least, they hate Trollocs and Fades." He was surprised to see the gaunt-faced man nod as if to himself. Bornhold raised an eyebrow. "Who told you that?" "A warder," Egwene said. She scrunched away from Baia's heated eyes. "He said wolves hate Trollocs, and Trollocs are afraid of wolves." Perrin was glad she had not mentioned Elias. "A warder," the grey-haired man sighed. "A creature of the Tar Valon witches. What else would that sort tell you, when he is a Darkfriend himself, and a servant of Darkfriends? Do you not know Trollocs have wolves' muzzles and teeth and wolves' fur?" Perrin blinked, trying to clear his head. His brain still felt like jellied pain, but there was something wrong here. He could not get his thoughts straight enough to puzzle it out. "Not all of them," Egwene muttered. Perrin gave Baia a wary look, but the gaunt man only watched her. "Some of them have horns like rams or goats, or hawks' beaks, or all sorts of things." Bornhold shook his head sadly. "I give you every chance, and you dig yourself deeper with every word." He held up one finger. "You will run with wolves, creatures of the Dark One." A second finger. "You admit to being acquainted with a warder, another creature of the Dark One. I doubt he would have told you what he did if it was only in passing." A third finger. "You, boy, carry a Tar Valon mark in your pocket. Most men outside Tar Valon get rid of those as fast as they can, unless they serve the Tar Valon witches." A fourth. "You carry a fighting man's weapon while you dress like a farm boy. A skulker, then." The thumb rose. "You know Trollocs and Myrddraal. This far south, only a few scholars and those who have travelled in the borderlands believe they are anything but stories. Perhaps you've been to the borderlands. If so, tell me where. I have travelled a good deal in the borderlands. I know them well. No? Ah, well then." He looked at his spread hand, then dropped it hard on the table. The grandfatherly expression said the grandchildren had been up to some very serious mischief indeed. "Why do you not tell me the truth of how you came to be running in the night with wolves?" Egwene opened her mouth, but Perrin saw the stubborn set of her jaw and knew right away she was going to tell one of the stories they had worked out. That would not do. Not now, not here. His head ached, and he wished he had time to think it out, but there was no time. Who could tell where this Bornhold had travelled, with what lands and cities he was familiar? If he caught them in a lie, there would be no going back to the truth. Bornhold would be convinced they were Darkfriends then. "We're from the Two Rivers," he said quickly. Egwene stared at him openly before she caught herself, but he pressed on with the truth, or a version of it. The two of them had left the Two Rivers to see Caemlyn. On the way they had heard of the ruins of a great city, but when they found Shadar Logoth, there were Trollocs there. The two of them managed to escape across the river Arinel, but by that time they were completely lost. Then they fell in with a man who offered to guide them to Caemlyn. He had said his name was none of their business, and he hardly seemed friendly, but they needed a guide. The first either of them had seen of wolves had been after the Children of the Light appeared. All they'd been trying to do was hide, so they would not get eaten by wolves or killed by the men on horses. "If we'd known you were Children of the Light," he finished, "we'd have gone to you for help." Baer snorted with disbelief. Perrin did not care overmuch. If the Lord Captain was convinced, Baer could not harm them. It was plain that Baer would stop breathing if Lord Captain Bornhold told him to. "There is no water in that," the grey-haired man said after a moment. Perrin's invention failed him. He knew he should have taken time to think it out. Egwene leaped into the breach. "We met him in Baerlon. The city was crowded with men who had come down from the mines after the winter, and we were put at the same table in an inn. We only talked to him for the length of a meal." Perrin breathed again. "Thank you, Egwene. Give them back their belongings, Child Baer. Not the weapons, of course." When Baer looked at him in surprise, Bornhold added, "Or are you one of those who have taken to looting the unenlightened, Child Baer? It is a bad business, that, yes? No man can be a thief and walk in the light." Baer seemed to struggle with disbelief at the suggestion. "Then you're letting us go?" Egwene sounded surprised. Perrin lifted his head to stare at the Lord Captain. "Of course not, child," Bornhold said sadly. "You may be telling the truth about being from the Two Rivers, since you know about Baerlon and the mines. But Shadar Logoth, that is a name very, very few know, most of them Darkfriends, and anyone who knows enough to know the name knows enough not to go there. I suggest you think of a better story on the journey to Amador. You will have time, since we must pause in Caemlyn, preferably the truth, child. There is freedom in truth and the light." Baer forgot some of his diffidence toward the grey-haired man. He spun from the prisoners, and there was an outraged snap to his words. "You can't. It is not allowed." Bornhold raised one eyebrow quizzically, and Baer pulled himself up short, swallowing. "Forgive me, my Lord Captain. I forgot myself, and I humbly beg pardon and submit myself for penance. But as my Lord Captain himself has pointed out, we must reach Caemlyn in time, and with most of our remounts gone, we will be hard-pressed enough without carrying prisoners along." "And what would you suggest?" Bornhold asked calmly. "The penalty for Darkfriends is death." The flat voice made it all the more jarring. He might have been suggesting stepping on a bug. There is no truce with the shadow. There is no mercy for Darkfriends. Zeal is to be applauded, Child Baer, but, as I must often tell my son Dane, overzealousness can be a grievous fault. Remember that the tenets also say no man is so lost that he cannot be brought to the light. These two are young. They cannot yet be deep in the shadow. They can yet be led to the light if they will only allow the shadow to be lifted from their eyes. We must give them that chance. For a moment Perrin almost felt affection for the grandfatherly man who stood between them and Baer. Then Bornhold turned his grandfather's smile on Egwene. "If you refuse to come to the light by the time we reach Amador, I will be forced to turn you over to the questioners, and beside them, Baer's zeal is but a candle beside the sun." The grey-haired man sounded like a man who regretted what he must do, but who had no intention of ever doing anything but his duty as he saw it. "Repent, renounce the Dark One, come to the light, confess your sins and tell what you know of this vileness with wolves, and you will be spared. That. You walk free, in the light." His gaze centered on Perrin, and he sighed sadly. Ice filled Perrin's spine. But you, just Perrin from the Two Rivers, you killed 2 of the children." He touched the axe that Baia still held. "For you, I fear, a gibbet waits in Amador." Rand narrowed his eyes, watching the dust tail that rose ahead, 3 or 4 bends of the road away. Mat was already headed toward the wild hedgerow alongside the roadway. Its evergreen leaves and densely intermeshed branches would hide them as well as a stone wall if they could find a way through to the other side. The other side of the road was marked by the sparse brown skeletons of head-high bushes, and beyond was an open field for half a mile to the woods. It might have been part of a farm not too long abandoned, but it offered no quick hiding place. He tried to judge the speed of the dust tail and the wind. A sudden gust swirled road dust up around him, obscuring everything. He blinked and adjusted the plain, dark scarf across his nose and mouth. None too clean now, it made his face itch, but it kept him from inhaling dust with every breath. A farmer had given it to him, a long-faced man with grooves in his cheeks from worry. "I don't know what you're running from," he had said with an anxious frown, "and I don't want to. You understand? My family." Abruptly, the farmer had dug 2 long scarves out of his coat pocket and pushed the tangle of wool at them. "Here's not much, but here belong to my boys. They have others. You don't know me, understand? It's hard times." Rand treasured the scarf. The list of kindnesses he had made in his mind in the days since Whitebridge was a short one, and he did not believe it would get much longer. Mat, all but his eyes hidden by the scarf wrapped around his head, hunted swiftly along the tall hedgerow, pulling at the leafy branches. Rand touched the heron-marked hilt at his belt, but let his hand fall away. Once already, cutting a hole through a hedge had almost given them away. The dust tail was moving toward them and staying together too long. Not the wind. At least it was not raining. Rain settled the dust. No matter how hard it fell, it never turned the hard-packed road to mud, but when it rained, there was no dust. Dust was the only warning they had before whoever it was came close enough to hear. Sometimes that was too late. "Here," Mat called softly. He seemed to step right through the hedge. Rand hurried to the spot. Someone had cut a hole there once. It was partly grown over, and from 3 feet away it looked as solid as the rest, but close up there was only a thin screen of branches. As he pushed through, he heard horses coming. Not the wind. He crouched behind the barely covered opening, clutching the hilt of his sword as the horsemen rode by. 5, 6, 7 of them, plainly dressed men but swords and spears, said they were not villagers. Some wore leather tunics with metal studs, and 2 had round steel caps. Merchants' guards, perhaps, between hirings? Perhaps. One of them casually swung his eyes toward the hedge as he went by the opening, and Rand bared an inch of his sword. Mat snarled silently, like a cornered badger, squinting above his scarf. His hand was under his coat. He always clutched the dagger from Shadar Logoth when there was danger. Rand was no longer sure if it was to protect himself or to protect the ruby-hilted dagger. Of late, Mat seemed to forget he had a bow sometimes. The riders passed at a slow trot, going somewhere with a purpose, but not too great a haste. Dust sifted through the hedge. Rand waited until the clop of the hooves faded before he stuck his head cautiously back through the hole. The dust tail was well down the road, going the way they had come. Eastward, the sky was clear. He climbed out onto the roadway, watching the column of dust move west. "Not after us," he said, halfway between a statement and a question. Mat scrambled out after him, looking warily in both directions. "Maybe," he said. "Maybe." Rand had no idea which way he meant it, but he nodded. Maybe. It had not begun like this, their journey down the Caemlyn road. For a long time after leaving Whitebridge, Rand would suddenly find himself staring back down the road behind them. Sometimes he would see someone who made his breath catch, a tall, skinny man hurrying up the road, or a lanky, white-haired fellow up beside the driver on a wagon. But it was always a pack peddler, or farmers making their way to market, never Thom Merrilin. Hope faded as the days passed. There was considerable traffic on the road, wagons and carts, people on horses and people afoot. They came singly and in groups, a train of merchants' wagons or a dozen horsemen together. They did not jam the road, and often there was nothing in sight except the all but leafless trees lining the hard-packed roadbed, but there were certainly more people travelling than Rand had ever seen in the Two Rivers. Most travelled in the same direction that they did, eastward toward Caemlyn. Sometimes they got a ride in a farmer's wagon for a little distance, a mile or 5, but more often They walked. Men on horseback they avoided. When they spotted even one rider in the distance, they scrambled off the road and hid until he was past. None ever wore a black cloak, and Rand did not really think a fade would let them see him coming, but there was no point in taking chances. In the beginning it was just the half-men they feared. The first village after Whitebridge looked so much like Emond's Field that Rand's steps dragged when he saw it. Thatched roofs with high peaks, and goodwives in their aprons gossiping over the fences between their houses, and children playing on a village green. The women's hair hung unbraided around their shoulders, and other small things were different too, but the whole together was like home. Cows cropped on the green, and geese waddled self-importantly across the road. The children tumbled, laughing, in the dust where the grass was gone altogether. They did not even look around when Rand and Mat went by. That was another thing that was different. Strangers were no oddity there. Two more did not draw so much as a second glance. Village dogs only raised their heads to sniff as he and Mat passed. None stirred themselves. It was coming on evening as they went through the village, and he felt a pang of homesickness as lights appeared in the windows. No matter what it looks like, a small voice whispered in his mind, it isn't really home. Even if you go into one of those houses, Thom won't be there. If he was, could you look him in the face? You know now, don't you? Except for little things like where you come from and who you are. No fevered dreams. He hunched his shoulders against taunting laughter inside his head. You might as well stop, the voice snickered. One place is as good as another when you aren't from anywhere, and the Dark One has you marked. Mat tugged at his sleeve, but he pulled loose and sawed at the houses. He did not want to stop, but he did want to look and remember. So much like home, but you'll never see that again, will you? Mat yanked at him again. His face was taut, the skin around his mouth and eyes white. Come on, Mat muttered. Come on. He looked at the village, as if he suspected something of hiding there. Come on. We can't stop yet. Rand turned in a complete circle, taking in the whole village, and sighed. They were not very far from Whitebridge. If the Merrilin could get past Whitebridge's wall without being seen, it would have no trouble at all searching this small village. He let himself be drawn on into the countryside beyond until the thatch-roofed houses were left behind. Night fell before they found a spot by moonlight, under some bushes still bearing their dead leaves. They filled their bellies with cold water from a shallow rivulet not far away and curled up on the ground, wrapped in their cloaks, without a fire. A fire could be seen, better to be cold. Uneasy with his memories, Rand woke often, and every time he could hear Mat muttering and tossing in his sleep. He did not dream that he could remember, but he did not sleep well. You'll never see home again. That was not the only night they spent with just their cloaks to protect them from the wind, and sometimes the rain, cold and soaking. It was not the only meal they made from nothing but cold water. Between them they had enough coins for a few meals at an inn, but a bed for the night would take too much. Things cost more outside the two rivers, more this side of the Arenelle than in Baerlon. What money they had left had to be saved for an emergency. One afternoon Rand mentioned the dagger with the ruby in its hilt, while they were trudging down the road with bellies too empty to rumble, and the sun low and weak, and nothing in view for the coming night but more bushes. Dark clouds built up overhead for rain during the night. He hoped they were lucky, maybe no more than an icy drizzle. He went on a few steps before he realized that Mat had stopped. He stopped, too, wriggling his toes in his boots. At least his feet felt warm. He eased the straps across his shoulders. His blanket roll and Thom's bundled cloak were not heavy, but even a few pounds weighed heavy after miles on an empty stomach. "What's the matter, Mat?" he said. "Why are you so anxious to sell it?" Mat demanded angrily. "I found it, after all. You ever think I might like to keep it? For a while, anyway. If you want to sell something, sell that bloody sword." Rand rubbed his hand along the heron-marked hilt. "My father gave this sword to me. It was his. I wouldn't ask you to sell something your father gave you. Blood and ashes, Mat. Do you like going hungry? Anyway, even if I could find somebody to buy it, how much would a sword bring? What would a farmer want with a sword? That ruby would fetch enough to take us all the way to Caemlyn in a carriage, maybe all the way to Tar Valon, and we'd eat every meal in an inn and sleep every night in a bed. Maybe you like the idea of walking halfway across the world and sleeping on the ground." He glared at Mat, and his friend glared back. They stood like that in the middle of the road until Mat suddenly gave an uncomfortable shrug and dropped his eyes to the road. Who would I sell it to, Rand? A farmer would have to pay in chickens. We couldn't buy a carriage with chickens. And if I even showed it in any village we've been through, they'd probably think we stole it. The light knows what would happen then." After a minute, Rand nodded reluctantly. "You're right. I know it. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to snap at you. It's only that I'm hungry and my feet hurt. Mine, too." They started down the road again, walking even more wearily than before. The wind gusted up, blowing dust in their faces. "Mine, too," Matt coughed. Farms did provide some meals and a few nights out of the cold. A haystack was nearly as warm as a room with a fire, at least compared to lying under the bushes, and a haystack, even one without a tarp over it, kept all but the heaviest rain off if you dug yourself in deeply enough. Sometimes Matt tried his hand at stealing eggs, and once he attempted to milk a cow left unattended, staked out on a long rope to crop in a field. Most farms had dogs, though, and farm dogs were watchful. A 2-mile run with baying hounds at their heels was too high a price for 2 or 3 eggs, as Rand saw it, especially when the dogs sometimes took hours to go away and let them down out of the tree where they had taken shelter. The hours were what he regretted. He did not really like doing it, but Rand preferred to approach a farmhouse openly in broad daylight. Now and again they had the dogs set on them anyway, without a word being said, for the rumors and the times made everyone who lived apart from other people nervous about strangers. But often an hour or so chopping wood or hauling water would earn a meal and a bed, even if the bed was a pile of straw in the barn. But an hour or two doing chores was an hour or two of daylight when they were standing still, an hour or two for the midral to catch up. Sometimes he wondered how many miles a fade could cover in an hour. He begrudged every minute of it, though admittedly not so much when he was wolfing down a good wife's hot soup. And when they had no food, knowing they had spent every possible minute moving toward Caemlyn did not do much to soothe an empty belly. Rand could not make up his mind if it was worse to lose time or go hungry, but Matt went beyond worrying about his belly or pursuit. "What do we know about them anyway?" Matt demanded one afternoon while they were mucking out stalls on a small farm. "Like Matt, what do they know about us?" Rand sneezed. They were working stripped to the waist, and sweat and straw covered them both liberally, and motes of straw dust hung in the air. "What I know is they'll give us some roast lamb and a real bed to sleep in." Matt dug his hayfork into the straw and manure, and gave a sidelong frown at the farmer, coming from the back of the barn with a bucket in one hand and his milking stool in the other. A stooped old man with skin like leather and thin grey hair. The farmer slowed when he saw Matt looking at him, then looked away quickly and hurried on out of the barn, slopping milk over the rim of the bucket in his haste. "He's up to something, I tell you," Matt said. "See the way he wouldn't meet my eye? Why are they so friendly to a couple of wanderers they never laid eyes on before? Tell me that. His wife says we remind her of their grandsons. Will you stop worrying about them? What we have to worry about is behind us." "I hope. He's up to something," Matt muttered. When they finished, they washed up at the trough in front of the barn, their shadows stretching long with the sinking sun. Rand toweled off with his shirt as they walked to the farmhouse. The farmer met them at the door. He leaned on a quarterstaff in a too casual manner. Behind him, his wife clutched her apron and peered past his shoulder, chewing her lip. Rand sighed. He did not think he and Matt reminded them of their grandsons any longer. "Our sons are coming to visit tonight," the old man said. "All 4 of them. I forgot. They're all 4 coming. Big lads. Strong. Be here any time now. I'm afraid we don't have the bed we promised you." His wife thrust a small bundle wrapped in a napkin past him. "Here, it's bread and cheese and pickles and lamb. Enough for 2 meals, maybe. Here." Her wrinkled face asked them to please take it and go. Rand took the bundle. "Thank you. I understand. Come on, Matt." Matt followed him, grumbling while he pulled his shirt over his head. Rand thought it best to cover as many miles as they could before stopping to eat. The old farmer had a dog. It could have been worse, he thought. 3 days earlier, while they were still working, they'd had the dogs set on them. The dogs and the farmer and his 2 sons, waving cudgels, chased them out to the Caemlyn road and half a mile down it before giving up. They had barely had time to snatch up their belongings and run. The farmer had carried a bow with a broad-head arrow nocked. "Don't come back here," he had shouted after them. "I don't know what you're up to, but don't let me see your shifty eyes again." Matt had started to turn back, fumbling at his quiver, but Rand pulled him on. "Are you crazy?" Matt gave him a sullen look, but at least he kept running. Rand sometimes wondered if it was worthwhile stopping at farms. The further they went, the more suspicious of strangers Matt became, and the less he was able to hide it, or bothered to. The meals got skimpier for the same work, and sometimes not even the barn was offered as a place to sleep. But then a solution to all their problems came to Rand, or so it seemed, and it came at Grinwell's farm. Master Grinwell and his wife had 9 children, the eldest, a daughter not more than a year younger than Rand and Matt. Master Grinwell was a sturdy man, and with his children he probably had no need of any more help, but he looked them up and down, taking in their travel-stained clothes and dusty boots, and allowed as how he could always find work for more hands. Mistress Grinwell said that if they were going to eat at her table, they would not do it in those filthy things. She was about to do laundry, and some of her husband's old clothes would fit them well enough for working. She smiled when she said it, and for a minute she looked to Rand just like Mistress Olvere. Though her hair was yellow, he had never seen hair that colour before. Even Matt seemed to lose some of his tension when her smile touched him. The eldest daughter was another matter. Dark-haired, big-eyed and pretty, Else grinned impudently at them whenever her parents were not looking. While they worked, moving barrels and sacks of grain in the barn, she hung over a stall door, humming to herself and chewing the end of one long pigtail, watching them. Rand she watched especially. He tried to ignore her, but after a few minutes he put on the shirt Master Grinwell had loaned him. It was tight across the shoulders and too short, but it was better than nothing. Else laughed out loud when he tugged it on. He began to think that this time it would not be Matt's fault when they were chased off. Perrin would know how to handle this, he thought. He'd make some offhand comment, and pretty soon she'd be laughing at his jokes instead of mooning around where her father can see. Only he could not think of any offhand comment, or any jokes either. Whenever he looked in her direction, she smiled at him in a way that would have her father loosing the dogs on them if he saw. Once she told him she liked tall men. All the boys on the farms around there were short. Matt gave a nasty snicker. Wishing he could think of a joke, Rand tried to concentrate on his hayfork. The younger children, at least, were a blessing in Rand's eyes. Matt's wariness always eased a little when there were children around. After supper they all settled in front of the fireplace, with Master Grinwell in his favourite chair, thumbing his pipe full of tabac, and Mistress Grinwell fussing with her sewing box and the shirt she had washed for him and Matt. Matt dug out Thom's coloured balls and began to juggle. He never did that unless there were children. The children laughed when he pretended to be dropping the balls, snatching them at the last minute, and they clapped for fountains and figure-eights and a 6-ball circle that he really did almost drop. But they took it in good part, Master Grinwell and his wife applauding as hard as their children. When Matt was done, bowing around the room with as many flourishes as Thom might have made, Rand took Thom's flute from its case. He could never handle the instrument without a pang of sadness. Touching its gold and silver scrollwork was like touching Thom's memory. He never handled the harp except to see that it was safe and dry. Thom had always said the harp was beyond a farm boy's clumsy hands, but whenever a farmer allowed them to stay, he always played one tune on the flute after supper. It was just a little something extra to pay the farmer, and maybe a way of keeping Thom's memory fresh. With a laughing mood already set by Matt's juggling, he played Three Girls in the Meadow. Master and Mistress Grinwell clapped along, and the smaller children danced around the floor, even the smallest boy, who could barely walk, stomping his feet in time. He knew he would win no prizes at Beltane, but after Thom's teaching he would not be embarrassed to enter. Else was sitting cross-legged in front of the fire, and as he lowered the flute after the last note, she leaned forward with a long sigh and smiled at him. "You play so beautifully. I never heard anything so beautiful." Mistress Grinwell suddenly paused in her sewing and raised an eyebrow at her daughter, then gave Rand a long, appraising look. He had picked up the leather case to put the flute away, but under her stare he dropped the case, and almost the flute too. If she accused him of trifling with her daughter. In desperation he put the flute back to his lips and played another song, then another and another. Mistress Grinwell kept watching him. He played The Wind That Shakes the Willow, and Coming Home from Tarwin's Gap, and Mistress Inora's Rooster, and The Old Black Bear. He played every song he could think of, but she never took her eyes off him. She never said anything either, but she watched and weighed. It was late when Master Grinwell finally stood up, chuckling and rubbing his hands together. Well, this has been rare fun, but it's way past our bedtime. You travelling lads make your own hours, but morning comes early on a farm. I'll tell you lads, I have paid good money at an inn for no better entertainment than I've had this night. For worse. I think they should have a reward, father, Mistress Grinwell said as she picked up her youngest boy, who had long since fallen asleep in front of the fire. The barn is no fit place to sleep. They can sleep in Else's room tonight, and she will sleep with me. Else grimaced. She was careful to keep her head down, but Rand saw it. He thought her mother did too. Master Grinwell nodded. Yes, much better than the barn. If you don't mind sleeping two to a bed, that is. Rand flushed. Mistress Grinwell was still looking at him. I do wish I could hear more of that flute. And you're juggling too. I like that. You know, there's a little task you could help with tomorrow, and... They'll be wanting an early start, father, Mistress Grinwell cut in. Arion is the next village the way they're going, and if they intend to try their luck at the inn there, they'll have to walk all day to get there before dark. Yes, mistress, Rand said, we will, and thank you. She gave him a tight-lipped smile as if she knew very well that his thanks were for more than her advice, or even supper and a warm bed. The whole next day Mat twitted him about Else as they made their way down the road. He kept trying to change the subject, and what the Grinwells had suggested about performing at inns was the easiest thing to mind. In the morning, with Else pouting as he left and Mistress Grinwell watching with a sharp-eyed look of good riddance and soonest mended, it was just something to keep Mat from talking. By the time they did reach the next village, it was something else again. With dusk descending, they entered the only inn in Arion, and Rand spoke to the innkeeper. He played Ferry o'er the river, which the plump innkeeper called Darling Sarah, and part of the road to Dun Aran, and Mat did a little juggling, and the upshot was that they slept in a bed that night and ate roasted potatoes and hot beef. It was the smallest room in the inn, to be sure, up under the eaves in the back, and the meal came in the middle of a long night of playing and juggling, but it was still a bed beneath a roof. Even better, to Rand, every daylight hour had been spent travelling, and the inn's patrons did not seem to care if Mat stared at them suspiciously. Some of them even looked askance at one another. The times made suspicion of strangers a commonplace, and there were always strangers at an inn. Rand slept better than he had since leaving Whitebridge, despite sharing a bed with Mat and his nocturnal muttering. In the morning, the innkeeper tried to talk them into staying another day or two, but when he could not, he called over a bleary-eyed farmer who had drunk too much to drive his cart home the night before. An hour later, they were 5 miles further east, sprawling on their backs on the straw in the back of Ezel Forney's cart. That became the way of their travelling. With a little luck, and maybe a ride or two, they could almost always reach the next village by dark. If there was more than one inn in a village, the innkeepers would bid for them once they heard Rand's flute and saw Mat juggle. Together they still did not come close to a gleeman, but they were more than most villages saw in a year. 2 or 3 inns in a town meant a better room with 2 beds and more generous portions of a better cut of meat, and sometimes even a few coppers in their pockets when they left besides. In the mornings there was almost always someone to offer a ride, another farmer who had stayed too late and drunk too much, or a merchant who had liked their entertainment enough not to mind if they hopped up on the back of one of his wagons. Rand began to think their problems were over till they reached Caemlyn. But then they came to 4 Kings. The village was bigger than most, but still a scruffy town to bear a name like 4 Kings. As usual, the Caemlyn road ran straight through the centre of the town, but another heavily travelled highway came in from the south too. Most villages were markets and gathering places for the farmers of the area, but there were few farmers to be seen here. 4 Kings survived as a stopover for merchants' wagon trains on their way to Caemlyn and to the mining towns in the mountains of mist beyond Baerlon, as well as the villages between. The southern road carried Lugard's trade with the mines in the west. Lugarder merchants going to Caemlyn had a more direct route. The surrounding country held few farms, barely enough to feed themselves and the town, and everything in the village centered on the merchants and their wagons, the men who drove them, and the laborers who loaded the goods. Plots of bare earth, ground to dust, lay scattered through 4 Kings, filled with wagons parked wheel to wheel and abandoned, except for a few bored guards. Stables and horse lots lined the streets, all of which were wide enough to allow wagons to pass and deeply rutted from too many wheels. There was no village green, and the children played in the ruts, dodging wagons and the curses of wagon drivers. Village women, their heads covered with scarves, kept their eyes down and walked quickly, sometimes followed by wagoners' comments that made Rand blush. Even Mat gave a start at some of them. No woman stood gossiping over the fence with a neighbour. Drab wooden houses stood cheek by jowl, with only narrow alleys between, and whitewash, where anyone had bothered to whitewash the weathered boards, faded as if it had not been freshened in years. Heavy shutters on the houses had not been open in so long that the hinges were solid lumps of rust. Noise hung over everything, clanging from blacksmiths, shouts from the wagon drivers, raucous laughter from the town's inns. Rand swung down from the back of a merchant's canvas-topped wagon as they came abreast of a garishly painted inn, all greens and yellows that caught the eye from afar among the leaden houses. The line of wagons kept moving. None of the drivers even seemed to notice that he and Mat had gone. Dusk was falling, and they all had their eyes on unhitching the horses and reaching the inns. Rand stumbled in a rut, then leaped quickly to avoid a heavy-laden wagon clattering the other way. The driver shouted a curse at him as the wagon rolled by. A village woman stepped around him and hurried on without ever meeting his eye. "I don't know about this place," he said. He thought he could hear music mixed in the din, but he could not tell from where it was coming. From the inn, maybe, but it was hard to be sure. "I don't like it. Maybe we'd better go on this time." Mat gave him a scornful look, then rolled his eyes at the sky. Dark clouds thickened overhead. "And sleep under a hedge tonight?" "In that, I'm used to a bed again." He cocked his head to listen, then grunted. "Maybe one of these places doesn't have musicians. Anyway, I'll bet they don't have a juggler." He slung his bow across his shoulders and started for the bright yellow door, studying everything through narrowed eyes. Rand followed doubtfully. There were musicians inside, their zither and drum almost drowned in coarse laughter and drunken shouting. Rand did not bother to find the landlord. The next two inns had musicians as well, and the same deafening cacophony. Roughly dressed men filled the tables and stumbled across the floor, waving mugs and trying to fondle serving maids who dodged with fixed, long-suffering smiles. The building shook with the racket, and the smell was sour, a stench of old wine and unwashed bodies. Of the merchants, in their silk and velvet and lace there was no sign. Private dining rooms above stairs protected their ears and noses. He and Mat only put their heads in the doors before leaving. He was beginning to think they would have no choice but to move on. The fourth inn, the Dancing Cartman, stood silent. It was as gaudy as the other inns, yellow trimmed in bright red and bilious, eye-wrenching green, though here the paint was cracked and peeling. Rand and Mat stepped inside. Only half a dozen men sat at the tables that filled the common room, hunched over their mugs, each one glumly alone with his thoughts. Business was definitely not good, but it had been better once. Exactly as many serving maids as there were patrons busied themselves around the room. There was plenty for them to do. Dirt crusted the floor and cobwebs filled the corners of the ceiling, but most were not doing anything really useful, only moving so they would not be seen standing still. A bony man with long, stringy hair to his shoulders turned to scowl at them as they came through the door. The first slow peal of thunder rumbled across Four Kings. "What do you want?" He was rubbing his hands on a greasy apron that hung to his ankles. Rand wondered if more grime was coming off on the apron or on the man's hands. He was the first skinny innkeeper Rand had seen. Well, speak up, buy a drink, or get out. Do I look like a rarey show?" Flushing, Rand launched into the spiel he had perfected at inns before this. "I play the flute, and my friend juggles, and you'll not see two better in a year. For a good room and a good meal, we'll fill this common room of yours." He remembered the filled common rooms he had already seen that evening, especially the man who had vomited right in front of him at the last one. He had had to step lively to keep his boots untouched. He faltered but caught himself and went on. "We'll fill your inn with men who will repay the little we cost 20 times over with the food and drink they buy." "Why should? Our god man plays the dulcimer," the innkeeper said sourly. "You have a drunk, Samelhake," one of the serving maids said. She was passing him with a tray and 2 mugs, and she paused to give Rand and Mat a plump smile. "Most times he can't see well enough to find the common room," she confided in a loud whisper. "Haven't even seen him in 2 days." Without taking his eyes off Rand and Mat, Heike casually backhanded her across the face. She gave a surprised grunt and fell heavily to the unwashed floor. One of the mugs broke, and the spilled wine washed rivulets in the dirt. You're docked for the wine and breakage. Getting fresh drinks. And hurry. Men don't pay to wait while you laze around." His tone was as offhand as the blow. None of the patrons looked up from their wine, and the other serving maids kept their eyes averted. The plump woman rubbed her cheek and stared pure murder at Harker, but she gathered the empty mug and the broken pieces on her tray and went off without a word. Heike sucked his teeth thoughtfully, eyeing Rand and Matt. His gaze clung to the heron-mark sword before he pulled it away. "Tell you what," he said finally, "you can have a couple of pallets in an empty storeroom in the back. Rooms are too expensive to give away. You eat when everybody's gone. There ought to be something left." Rand wished there was an inn in Four Kings they had not yet tried. Since leaving Whitebridge he had met coolness, indifference and outright hostility, but nothing that gave him the sense of unease that this man and this village did. He told himself it was just the dirt and squalor and noise, but the misgivings did not go away. Matt was watching Hake as if he suspected some trap, but he gave no sign of wanting to give up the dancing cartman for a bed under a hedge. Thunder rattled the windows. Rand sighed. "The pallets will do if they're clean, and if there are enough clean blankets. But we eat 2 hours after full dark, no later, and the best you have. Here, we'll show you what we can do." He reached for the fruit case, but Hake shook his head. "Don't matter. This lot will be satisfied with any kind of screeching so long as it sounds something like music." His eyes touched Rand's sword again. His thin smile touched nothing but his lips. "Eat when you want, but if you don't bring the crowd in, out you go in the street." He nodded over his shoulder at two hard-faced men sitting against the wall. They were not drinking, and their arms were thick enough for legs. When Harkin nodded at them, their eyes shifted to Rand and Matt, flat and expressionless. Rand put one hand on his sword hilt, hoping the twisting in his stomach did not show on his face. "As long as we get what's agreed on," he said in a level tone. Harke blinked, and for a moment he seemed uneasy himself. Abruptly he nodded. "What I said, isn't it? Well, get started. You won't bring anybody in just standing there." He stalked off, scowling and shouting at the serving maids, as if there were 50 customers they were neglecting. There was a small, raised platform at the far end of the room, near the door to the back. Rand lifted a bench up on it and settled his cloak, blanket roll and Thom's bundled cloak behind the bench, with the sword lying atop them. He wondered if he had been wise to keep wearing the sword openly. Swords were common enough, but the heron mark attracted attention and speculation. Not from everybody, but any notice at all made him uncomfortable. He could be leaving a clear trail for the Myrddraal if Fades needed that kind of trail. They did not seem to. In any case, he was reluctant to stop wearing it. Tam had given it to him, his father. As long as he wore the sword, there was still some connection between Tam and him, a thread that gave him the right to still call Tam father. Too late now, he thought. He was not sure what he meant, but he was sure it was true. Too late. At the first note of Cock of the North, the half-dozen patrons in the common room lifted their heads out of their wine. Even the two bouncers sat forward a little. They all applauded when he finished, including the two toughs, and once more when Matt sent a shower of coloured balls spinning through his hands. Outside, the sky muttered again. The rain was holding off, but the pressure of it was palpable. The longer it waited, the harder it would fall. Word spread, and by the time it was dark outside, the inn was packed full with men laughing and talking so loud that Rand could barely hear what he was playing. Only the thunder overpowered the noise in the common room. Lightning flashed in the windows, and in the momentary lulls he could faintly hear rain drumming on the roof. Men who came in now dripped trails across the floor. Whenever he paused, voices shouted the names of tunes through the din. A good many names he did not recognize, though when he got someone to hum a bit of it, he often found he did know the song. It had been that way other places before. Jolly Jame was Rhea's fling here, and had been Colours of the Sun at an earlier stop. Some names stayed the same, others changed with 10 miles distance, and he had learned new songs too. The Drunken Peddler was a new one, though sometimes it was called Tinker in the Kitchen. Two Kings Came Hunting was Two Horses Running, and several other names besides. He played the ones he knew, and men pounded the tables for more. Others called for Matt to juggle again. Sometimes fights broke out between those wanting music and those who fancied juggling. Once a knife flashed, and a woman screamed, and a man reeled back from a table with blood streaming down his face, but Jake and Strom, the two bouncers, closed in swiftly, and with complete impartiality threw everyone involved into the street with lumps on their heads. That was their tactic with any trouble. The talk and the laughing went on as if nothing had occurred. Nobody even looked around except those the bouncers jostled on their way to the door. The patrons were free with their hands too, when one of the serving maids let herself grow unwary. More than once Jack or Strom had to rescue one of the women, though they were none too quick about it. The way Hake carried on, screaming and shaking the woman involved, he always considered it her fault, and the teary eyes and stammered apologies said she was willing to accept his opinion. The women jumped whenever Hake frowned, even if he was looking somewhere else. Rand wondered why any of them put up with it. Hake smiled when he looked at Rand and Matt. After a while, Rand realized Hake was not smiling at them. The smiles came when his eyes slid behind them to where the heron-marked sword lay. Once, when Rand set the gold and silver chased flute down beside his stool, the flute got a smile too. The next time he changed places with Matt at the front of the dais, he leaned over to speak in Matt's ear. Even that close, he had to speak loudly, but with all the noise, he doubted if anyone else could hear. "Hake's going to try to rob us." Matt nodded, as if it was nothing he had not expected. "We'll have to bar our door tonight." Bar our door? Jock and Strom could break down a door with their fists. "Let's get out of here. Wait till after we eat, at least. I'm hungry." "They can't do anything here," Matt added. The packed common room shouted impatiently for them to get on with it. Hake was glaring at them. "Anyway, you want to sleep outside tonight?" An especially strong crack of lightning drowned out everything else, and for an instant the light through the windows was stronger than the lamps. "I just want to get out without my head being broken," Rand said. But Matt was already slouching back to take his rest on the stool. Rand sighed and launched into The Road to Dun Éireann. A lot of them seemed to like that one. He had already played it 4 times, and they still shouted for it. The trouble was that Matt was right, as far as he went. He was hungry too, and he could not see how Hake could give them any trouble while the common room was full, and getting fuller. For every man who left or was thrown out by Jack and Strom, 2 came in from the street. They shouted for the juggling, or for a particular tune, but mostly they were interested in drinking and fondling the serving maids. One man was different though. He stood out in every way among the crowd in the dancing cartman. Merchants apparently had no use for the run-down inn. There were not even any private dining rooms for them as far as he could make out. The patrons were all rough-dressed, with the tough skin of men who labored in the sun and wind. This man was sleekly fleshy, with a soft look to his hands, and a velvet coat, and a dark green velvet cloak lined with blue silk was slung around his shoulders. All of his clothes had an expensive cut to them. His shoes, soft velvet slippers, not boots, were not made for the rutted streets of 4 Kings, or for any streets at all for that matter. He came in well after dark, shaking the rain off his cloak as he looked around, a twist of distaste on his mouth. He scanned the room once, already turning to go, then suddenly gave a start at nothing, Rand could see, and sat down at a table Jack and Strom had just emptied. A serving maid stopped at his table, then brought him a mug of wine which he pushed to one side and never touched again. She seemed in a hurry to leave his table both times, though he did not try to touch her or even look at her. Whatever it was about him that made her uneasy, others who came close to him noticed it too. For all of his soft look, whenever some callous-handed wagon driver decided to share his table, one glance was all it took to send the man looking elsewhere. He sat as if there were no one else in the room but him, and Rand and Matt. Them he watched over steepled hands that glittered with a ring on each finger. He watched them with a smile of satisfied recognition. Rand murmured to Matt as they were changing places again, and Matt nodded. "I saw him," he muttered. "Who is he? I keep thinking I know him." The same thought had occurred to Rand, tickling the back of his memory, but he could not bring it forward. Yet he was sure that face was one he had never seen before. When they had been performing for 2 hours, as near as Rand could estimate, he slipped the flute into its case, and he and Matt gathered up their belongings. As they were stepping down from the low platform, Hake came bustling up, anger twisting his narrow face. "It's time to eat," Rand said to forestall him, "and we don't want our things stolen. You want to tell the cook." Heike hesitated, still angry, trying unsuccessfully to keep his eyes off what Rand held in his arms. Casually, Rand shifted his bundle so he could rest one hand on the sword. "Or you can try throwing us out." He made the emphasis deliberately, then added, "There's a lot of night left for us to play, yet we have to keep our strength up if we're going to perform well enough to keep this crowd spending money. How long do you think this room will stay full if we fall over from hunger?" Heike's eyes twitched over the room full of men putting money in his pocket. Then he turned and stuck his head through the door to the rear of the inn. "Feed 'em," he shouted. Rounding on Rand and Matt, he snarled, "Don't be all night about it. I expect you up there till the last man's gone." Some of the patrons were shouting for the musician and the juggler, and Heike turned to soothe them. The man in the velvet cloak was one of the anxious ones. Rand motioned Matt to follow him. A stout door separated the kitchen from the front of the inn, and, except when it opened to let a serving maid through, the rain pounding the roof was louder in the kitchen than the shouts from the common room. It was a big room, hot and steamy from stoves and ovens, with a huge table covered with half-prepared food and dishes ready to be served. Some of the serving maids sat clustered on a bench near the rear door, rubbing their feet and chattering away all at once with the fat cook, who talked back at the same time and waved a big spoon to emphasize her points. They all glanced up as Rand and Matt came in, but it did not slow their conversation or stop their foot rubbing. "We ought to get out of here while we have the chance," Rand said softly. But Matt shook his head, his eyes fixed. Oh, the 2 plates the cook was filling with beef and potatoes and peas. She hardly looked at the 2 of them, keeping up her talk with the other women while she pushed things aside on the table with her elbows and set the plates down, adding forks. "After we eat is time enough." Matt slid onto a bench and began using his fork as if it were a shovel. Rand sighed, but he was right behind Matt. He had had only a butt end of bread to eat since the night before. His belly felt as empty as a beggar's purse, and the cooking smells that filled the kitchen did not help. He quickly had his mouth full, though Matt was getting his plate refilled by the cook before he had finished half of his. He did not mean to eavesdrop on the women's talk, but some of the words reached out and grabbed him. "Sounds crazy to me." "Crazy or not, it's what I hear." He went to half the inns in town before he came here. Just walked in, looked around, and walked out without saying one word, even at the Royal Inn. Like it wasn't raining at all. Maybe he thought here was the most comfortable. That brought gales of laughter. "What I hear is he didn't even get to Four Kings till after nightfall, and his horses blowing like they'd been pushed hard. Where'd he come from to get caught out after dark? Nobody but a fool or a madman travels anywhere and plans it that badly." Well, maybe he's a fool, but he's a rich one. I hear he even has another carriage for his servants and baggage. There's money there, mark my words. Did you see that cloak of his? I wouldn't mind having that my own self. He's a little plump for my taste, but I always say a man can't be too fat if enough gold comes with it. They all doubled over giggling, and the cook threw back her head and roared with laughter. Rand dropped his fork on his plate. A thought he did not like bubbled in his head. "I'll be back in a minute," he said. Matt barely nodded, stuffing a piece of potato into his mouth. Rand picked up his sword belt along with his cloak as he stood and buckled it around his waist on the way to the back door. No one paid him any mind. The rain was bucketing down. He swung his cloak around his shoulders and pulled the hood over his head, holding the cloak closed as he trotted across the stable yard. A curtain of water hid everything except when lightning flashed, but he found what he was hunting. The horses had been taken into the stable, but the 2 black lacquered carriages glistened wetly outside. Thunder grumbled, and a bolt of lightning streaked above the inn. In the brief burst of light he made out a name in gold script on the coach doors. Howell Gode. Unmindful of the rain beating at him, he stood staring at the name he could no longer see. He remembered where he had last seen black lacquered coaches with their owners' names on the door, and sleek, overfed men in silk-lined velvet cloaks and velvet slippers. Whitebridge. A Whitebridge merchant could have a perfectly legitimate reason to be on his way to Caemlyn. A reason that sends him to half the inns in town before he chooses the one where you are. A reason that makes him look at you as if he's found what he's searching for. Rand shivered, and suddenly he was aware of rain trickling down his back. His cloak was tightly woven, but it had never been meant to stand up to this kind of downpour. He hurried back to the inn, splashing through deepening puddles. Jack blocked the door as he started through. Well, 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 out here alone in the dark. Dark's dangerous, boy. Rain slicked Ram's hair down across his forehead. The stable-yard was empty except for them. He wondered if Hake had decided he wanted the sword and the flute badly enough to forgo keeping the crowd in the common room. Brushing water out of his eyes with one hand, he put the other on his sword. Even wet, the knobby leather made a sure grip for his fingers. Has Hake decided all those men will stay just for his ale, instead of going where there's entertainment too? If he has, we'll call the meal even for what we've done so far and be on our way. Dry in the doorway, the big man looked out at the rain and snorted. In this? His eyes slid down to Rand's hand on the sword. You know, me and Strom got a bet. He figures you stole that from your old grandmother. Me, I figure your grandmother'd kick you round the pig pen and hang you out to dry. He grinned. His teeth were crooked and yellow, and the grin made him look even meaner. Night's long yet, boy. Rand brushed past him and Jack let him by with an ugly chuckle. Inside, he tossed off his cloak and dropped on the bench at the table he had left only minutes before. Matt was done with his second plate and working on a third, eating more slowly now but intently, as if he planned to finish every bite if it killed him. Jack took up a place by the door to the stable-yard, leaning against the wall and watching them. Even the cook seemed to feel no urge to talk with him there. He's from Whitebridge, Rand said softly. There was no need to say who he was. Matt's head swiveled toward him, a piece of beef on the end of the fork suspended halfway to his mouth. Conscious of Jack watching, Rand stirred the food on his plate. He could not have gotten a mouthful down if he had been starving, but he tried to pretend an interest in the peas as he told Matt about the carriages and what the women had said, in case Matt had not been listening. Obviously he had not been. Matt blinked in surprise and whistled between his teeth, then frowned at the meat on his fork and grunted as he tossed the fork onto his plate. Rand wished he would make at least an effort to be circumspect. "After us," Matt said when he finished. The creases in Matt's forehead deepened. "A dark friend? Maybe. I don't know." Rand glanced at Jack and the big man stretched elaborately, shrugging shoulders as big as any blacksmith's. "Do you think we can get past him?" "Not without him making enough noise to bring Haker and the other one. I knew we should never have stopped here." Rand gaped, but before he could say anything, Hake pushed through the door from the common room. Strom bulked large over his shoulder. Jake stepped in front of the back door. "You going to eat all night?" Hake barked. "I didn't feed you so you could lie around out here." Rand looked at his friend. Later, Matt mouthed, and they gathered their things under the watchful eyes of Hake, Strom, and Jack. In the common room, cries for juggling and the names of tunes burst through the clamour as soon as Rand and Matt appeared. The man in the velvet cloak, Howl Gode, still appeared to ignore everyone around him, but he was nonetheless seated on the edge of his chair. At the sight of them he leaned back, the satisfied smile returning to his lips. Rand took the first turn at the front of the dais, playing Drawing Water from the Well, with only half his mind on it. No one seemed to notice the few wrong notes. He tried to think of how they were going to get away, and tried to avoid looking at Gode, too. If he was after them, there was no point in letting him know they knew it. As for getting away, he had never realized before what a good trap an inn made. Hake, Jake, and Strom did not even have to keep a close eye on them. The crowd would let them know if he or Matt left the dais. As long as the common room was full of people, Hake could not send Jack and Strom after them. But as long as the common room was full of people, they could not get away without Hake knowing. And Gode was watching their every move, too. It was so funny he would have laughed if he had not been on the point of throwing up. They would just have to be wary and wait their chance. When he changed places with Matt, Rand groaned to himself. Matt glared at Hark, at Strom, at Jock, without a care to whether they noticed or wondered why. When he was not actually handling the balls, his hand rested under his coat. Rand hissed at him, but he paid no attention. If Haker saw that ruby, he might not wait until they were alone. If the men in the common room saw it, half of them might join in with Hake. Worst of all, Matt stared at the Whitebridge merchant, the dark friend, twice as hard as at anyone else, and Gode noticed. There was no way he could avoid noticing. But it did not disturb his aplomb in the least. His smile deepened, if anything, and he nodded to Matt as if to an old acquaintance, then looked at Rand and raised a questioning eyebrow. Rand did not want to know what the question was. He tried to avoid looking at the man, but he knew it was too late for that. Too late. Too late again. Only one thing seemed to shake the velvet-cloaked man's equilibrium: Rand's sword. He had left it on. 2 or 3 men staggered up to ask if he thought his playing was so bad that he needed protection, but none of them had noticed the heron on the hilt. Gode noticed. His pale hands clenched, and he frowned at the sword for a long time before his smile came back. When it did, it was not as sure as before. One good thing, at least, Rand thought. If he believes I can live up to the heron mark, maybe he'll leave us alone. Then all we have to worry about is Hake and his bullies. It was hardly a comforting thought, and, sword or no sword, Gode kept watching and smiling. To Rand, the night seemed to last a year. All those eyes looking at him, Hake and Jack and Strom like vultures watching a sheep caught in a bog, Gode waiting like something even worse. He began to think that everybody in the room was watching with some hidden motive. Sour wine fumes and the stench of dirty, sweating bodies made his head swim, and the din of voices beat at him till his eyes blurred, and even the sound of his own flute scratched at his ears. The crash of the thunder seemed to be inside his skull. Weariness hung on him like an iron weight. Eventually, the need to be up with the dawn began to pull men reluctantly out into the dark. A farmer had only himself to answer to, but merchants were notoriously unfeeling about hangovers when they were paying drivers' wages. In the small hours, the common rooms slowly emptied, as even those who had rooms above stairs staggered off to find their beds. Gode was the last patron. When Rand reached for the leather flute case, yawning, Gode stood up and slung his cloak over his arm. The serving maids were cleaning up, muttering among themselves about the mess of spilled wine and broken crockery. Hake was locking the front door with a big key. Gode cornered Hake for a moment, and Hake called one of the women to show him to a room. The velvet-cloaked man gave Matt and Rand a knowing smile before he disappeared upstairs. Hake was looking at Rand and Matt. Jack and Strom stood at his shoulders. Rand hastily finished hanging his things from his shoulders, holding them all awkwardly behind him with his left hand so he could reach his sword. He made no move toward it, but he wanted to know it was ready. He suppressed a yawn. How tired he was something they should not know. Matt shouldered his bow and his few other belongings awkwardly, but he put his hand under his coat as he watched Hake and his toughs approach. Hake was carrying an oil lamp, and to Rand's surprise he gave a little bow and gestured to a side door with it. "Your pallets are this way." Only a slight twist of his lips spoiled his act. Matt thrust his chin out at Jack and Strom. "You need those 2 to show us our beds?" "I'm a man of property," Hake said, smoothing the front of his soiled apron, "and men of property can't be too careful." A crash of thunder rattled the windows, and he glanced significantly at the ceiling, then gave them a toothy grin. "You want to see your beds or not?" Rand wondered what would happen if he said they wanted to leave. "If you really did know more about using a sword than the few exercises Lan showed you." "Lead the way," he said, trying to make his voice hard. "I don't like having anybody behind me." Strom snickered, but Hake nodded placidly and turned toward the side door, and the 2 big men swaggered after him. Taking a deep breath, Rand gave a wishful glance at the door to the kitchen. If Hake had already locked the back door, running now would only begin what he was hoping to avoid. He followed the innkeeper glumly. At the side door he hesitated, and Matt crowded into his back. The reason for Hake's lamp was apparent. The door led into a hall as black as pitch. Only the lamp Hake carried, silhouetting Jacques and Strom, gave him the courage to keep on. If they turned, he would know it. And do what? The floor creaked under his boots. The hall ended in a rough, unpainted door. He had not seen if there were any other doors along the way. Hake and his bullies went through, and he followed quickly before they could have a chance to set a trap, but Hake merely lifted the lamp high and gestured at the room. "Here it is. An old storeroom," he had called it, and by the look of it not used in some time. Weathered barrels and broken crates filled half the floor. Steady drips fell from more than one place on the ceiling, and a broken pane in the filthy window let the rain blow in freely. Unidentifiable odds and ends littered the shelves, and thick dust covered almost everything. The presence of the promised pallets was a surprise. The sword makes him nervous. He won't try anything until we're sound asleep. Rand had no intention of sleeping under Hake's roof. As soon as the innkeeper left, he intended to be out the window. "It'll do," he said. He kept his eyes on Hake, wary for a signal to the 2 grinning men at the innkeeper's side. It was an effort not to wet his lips. "Leave the lamp." Heike grunted, but pushed the lamp onto a shelf. He hesitated, looking at them, and Rand was sure he was about to give the word for Jack and Strom to jump them. But his eyes went to Rand's sword with a calculating frown, and he jerked his head at the two big men. Surprise flashed across their broad faces, but they followed him out of the room without a backward glance. Rand waited for the creak, creak, creak of their footsteps to fade away, then counted to 50 before sticking his head into the hall. The blackness was broken only by a rectangle of light that seemed as distant as the moon, the door to the common room. As he pulled his head in, something big moved in the darkness near the far door. Jack or Strom, standing guard. A quick examination of the door told him all he needed to know, little of it good. The boards were thick and stout, but there was no lock and no bar on the inside. It did open into the room, though. "I thought they were going for us," Matt said. "What are they waiting for?" He had the dagger out, gripped in a white-knuckled fist. Lamplight flickered on the blade. His bow and quiver lay forgotten on the floor. For us to go to sleep. Rand started rummaging through the barrels and crates. "Help me find something to block the door." "Why? You don't really intend to sleep here, do you? Let's get out the window and gone. I'd rather be wet than dead. One of them is at the end of the hall. We make any noise and they'll be down on us before we can blink. I think Hake would rather face us awake than risk letting us get away." Muttering, Matt joined his search, but there was nothing useful in any of the litter on the floor. The barrels were empty, the crates splintered, and the whole lot of them piled in front of the door would not stop anyone from opening it. Then something familiar on a shelf caught Rand's eye. 2 splitting wedges covered with rust and dust. He took them down with a grin. Hastily, he shoved them under the door and, when the next roll of thunder rattled the inn, drove them in with 2 quick kicks of his heel. The thunder faded, and he held his breath, listening. All he heard was the rain pounding on the roof. No floorboards creaking under running feet. The window, he said. It had not been opened in years, from the dirt crusted around it. They strained together, pushing up with all their might. Rand's knees wobbled before the sash budged. It groaned with each reluctant inch. When the opening was wide enough for them to slip through, he crouched, then stopped. "Blood and ashes," Matt growled. No wonder Hake wasn't worried about us slipping out. Iron bars in an iron frame glistened wetly in the light from the lamp. Rand pushed at them. They were as solid as a boulder. "I saw something," Matt said. He pawed hurriedly through the litter on the shelves and came back with a rusty crowbar. He rammed the end of it under the iron frame on one side, and Rand winced. "Remember the noise, Matt?" Matt grimaced and muttered under his breath, but he waited. Rand put his hands on the crowbar and tried to find good footing in the growing puddle of water under the window. Thunder rolled and they heaved, with a tortured squeal of nails that made the hairs lift on Rand's neck. The frame shifted, a quarter of an inch, if that. Timing themselves to peals of thunder and lightning cracks, they heaved on the crowbar again and again. Nothing. A quarter of an inch. Nothing. A hair's breadth. Nothing. Nothing. Suddenly, Rand's feet slipped in the water, and they crashed to the floor. The crowbar clattered against the bars like a gong. He lay in a puddle, holding his breath and listening. Silence but for the rain. Matt nursed bruised knuckles and glared at him. "We'll never get out at this rate." The iron frame was pushed out from the window, not quite far enough to get 2 fingers under it. Dozens of thick nails crossed the narrow opening. "We just have to keep trying," Rand said, getting up. But as he set the crowbar under the edge of the frame, the door creaked as someone tried to open it. The splitting wedges held it shut. He exchanged a worried look with Matt. Matt pulled the dagger out again. The door gave another squeak. Rand took a deep breath and tried to make his voice steady. "Go away, Hake. We're trying to sleep. I fear you mistake me." The voice was so sleek and full of itself that it named its owner, Howl Gode. "Master Hake and his minions will not trouble us. They sleep soundly, and in the morning they will only be able to wonder where you've vanished to. Let me in, my young friends. We must talk." "We don't have anything to talk to you about," Matt said. "Go away and let us sleep." Gode's chuckle was nasty. "Of course we have things to talk about. You know that as well as I. I saw it in your eyes. I know what you are, perhaps better than you do. I can feel it coming from you in waves. Already you halfway belong to my master. Stop running and accept it. Things will be so much easier for you. If the Tar Valon hags find you, you'll wish you could cut your own throat before they are done, but you won't be able to. Only my master can protect you from them." Rand swallowed hard. "We don't know what you're talking about." "Leave us alone." The floorboards in the hall squeaked. Gode was not alone. How many men could he have brought in 2 carriages? "Stop being foolish, my young friends. You know very well. The great Lord of the Dark has marked you for his own. It is written that when he awakes, the new Dreadlords will be there to praise him. You must be 2 of them, else I would not have been sent to find you. Think of it. Think of it. Life everlasting and power beyond dreams." His voice was thick with hunger for that power himself. Rand glanced back at the window just as lightning split the sky, and he almost groaned. The brief flash of light showed men outside, men ignoring the rain that drenched them as they stood watching the window. "I tire of this," Gode announced. "You will submit to my master, to your master, or you will be made to submit. That would not be pleasant for you. The great Lord of the Dark rules death, and he can give life in death or death in life as he chooses. Open this door. One way or another, your running is at an end. Open it, I say." He must have said something else too, for suddenly a heavy body thudded against the door. It shivered, and the wedges slid a fraction of an inch with a grate of rust rubbing off on wood. Again and again the door trembled as bodies hurled themselves at it. Sometimes the wedges held, sometimes they slid another tiny bit, and bit by tiny bit the door crept inexorably inward. "Submit," Gode demanded from the hall, "or spend eternity wishing that you had, if we don't have any choice." Mat licked his lips under Rand's stare. His eyes darted like the eyes of a badger in a trap. His face was pale, and he panted as he spoke. "We could say yes, and then get away later." "Blood and ashes, Rand. There's no way out." The words seemed to drift to Rand through wool stuffed in his ears. No way out. Thunder muttered overhead and was drowned in a slash of lightning. Have to find a way out. Gode called to them, demanding, appealing. The door slid another inch toward being open. A way out. Light filled the room, flooding vision. The air roared and burned. Rand felt himself picked up and dashed against the wall. He slid down in a heap, ears ringing and every hair on his body trying to stand on end. Dazed, he staggered to his feet. His knees wobbled, and he put a hand against the wall to steady himself. He looked around in amazement. The lamp, lying on its side on the edge of one of the few shelves, still clinging to the walls, still burned and gave light. All the barrels and crates, some blackened and smouldering, lay toppled where they had been hurled. The window, bars and all, and most of the wall too, had vanished, leaving a splintered hole. The roof sagged, and tendrils of smoke fought the rain around the jagged edges of the opening. The door hung off its hinges, jammed in the doorframe at an angle slanting into the hall. With a feeling of woozy unreality, he stood the lamp up. It seemed the most important thing in the world was making sure it did not break. A pile of crates suddenly heaved apart, and Mat stood up in the middle of it. He weaved on his feet, blinking and fumbling at himself, as if wondering if everything was still attached. He peered toward Rand. "Rand? Is that you? You're alive. I thought we were both." He broke off, biting his lip and shaking. It took Rand a moment to realize he was laughing and on the edge of hysteria. "What happened, Mat? 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 What happened?" One last shiver racked Mat, and then he was still. "Lightning, Rand. I was looking right at the window when it hit the bars. Lightning. I can't see worth—" He broke off, squinting at the aslant door, and his voice went sharp. "Where's Gode?" Nothing moved in the dark corridor beyond the door. Of Gode and his companions there was neither sign nor sound, though anything could have lain in the blackness. Rand found himself hoping they were dead, but he would not have put his head into the hall to find out for sure if he had been offered a crown. Nothing moved out in the night beyond where the wall had been either, but others were up and about. Confused shouts came from above his stairs in the inn, and the pounding of running feet. "Let's go while we can," Rand said. Hastily helping separate their belongings from the rubble, he grabbed Mat's arm and half-pulled, half-guided his friend through the gaping hole into the night. Mat clutched his arm, stumbling beside him with his head pushed forward in an effort to see. As the first rain hit Rand's face, lightning forked above the inn, and he came to a convulsive stop. Gode's men were still there, lying with their feet toward the opening. Pelted by the rain, their open eyes stared at the sky. "What is it?" Mat asked. "Blood and ashes. I can hardly see my own bloody hand." "Nothing," Rand said. Luck. The light's own. Is it? Shivering, he carefully guided Mat around the bodies. Just the lightning. There was no light save the lightning, and he stumbled in the ruts as they ran staggering away from the inn. With Mat almost hanging on him, every stumble almost pulled them both down, but tottering, panting, they ran. Once he looked back, once before the rain thickened to a deafening curtain that blotted the dancing cartman from sight. Lightning silhouetted the figure of a man at the back of the inn, a man shaking his fist at them, or at the sky. Gode or Hake, he did not know, but either one was as bad as the other. The rain came in a deluge, isolating them in a wall of water. He hurried through the night, listening through the roar of the storm for the sound of pursuit. Under a leaden sky, the high-wheeled cart bumped east along the Caemlyn road. Rand pulled himself out of the straw in back to look over the side. It was easier than it had been an hour earlier. His arms felt as if they might stretch instead of drawing him up, and for a minute his head wanted to keep on going and float away, but it was easier. He hooked his elbows over the low slats and watched the land roll past. The sun, still hidden by dull clouds, yet stood high overhead, but the cart was clattering into another village of vine-covered, red brick houses. Towns had been getting closer together since Four Kings. Some of the people waved or called a greeting to Higham Kinch, the farmer, whose cart it was. Master Kinch, leathery-faced and taciturn, shouted back a few words each time, around the pipe in his teeth. The clenched teeth made what he said all but unintelligible, but it sounded jovial and seemed to satisfy. They went back to what they were doing without another glance at the cart. No one appeared to pay any mind to the farmer's two passengers. The village inn moved through Rand's field of vision. It was whitewashed, with a grey slate roof. People bustled in and out, nodding casually and waving to one another. Some of them stopped to speak. They knew one another. Villagers mostly, by their clothes, boots and trousers and coats, not much different from what he wore himself, though with an inordinate fondness for colourful stripes. The women wore deep bonnets that hid their faces and white aprons with stripes. Maybe they were all townsmen and local farm folk. Does that make any difference? He dropped back on the straw, watching the village dwindle between his feet. Fenced fields and trimmed hedges lined the road, and small farmhouses with smoke rising from red brick chimneys. The only woods near the road were coppices, well tended for firewood, tame as a farmyard. But the branches stood leafless against the sky, as stark as in the wild woods to the west. A line of wagons, heading the other way, rumbled down the centre of the road, crowding the cart over onto the verge. Master Kinch shifted his pipe to the corner of his mouth and spat between his teeth. With one eye on his offside wheel, to make sure it did not tangle in the hedge, he kept the cart moving. His mouth tightened as he glanced at the merchant's train. None of the wagon drivers cracking their long whips in the air above 8-horse teams, none of the hard-faced guards slouching in their saddles alongside the wagons, looked at the cart. Rand watched them go, his chest tight. His hand was under his cloak, gripping his sword hilt until the last wagon lurched by. As that final wagon rattled away toward the village they had just left, Mat turned on the seat beside the farmer and leaned back until he found Rand's eyes. The scarf that did duty for dust when need be shaded his own eyes, folded over thickly and tied low around his forehead. Even so, he squinted in the grey daylight. "You see anything back there?" he asked quietly. "What about the wagons?" Rand shook his head, and Mat nodded. He had seen nothing either. Master Kinch glanced at them out of the corner of his eye, then shifted his pipe again and flapped the reins. That was all, but he had noticed. The horse picked up the pace a step. "Your eyes still hurt?" Rand asked. Mat touched the scarf around his head. "No, not much. Not unless I look almost right at the sun, anyway. How about you?" "What about you? Are you feeling any better?" "Some." He really was feeling better, he realized. It was a wonder to get over being sick so fast. More than that, it was a gift of the light. It has to be the light. It has to be. Suddenly, a body of horsemen was passing the cart, heading west like the merchants' wagons. Long white collars hung down over their mail and plate, and their cloaks and undercoats were red, like the gat attenders' uniforms in Whitebridge, but better made and better fitting. Each man's conical helmet shone like silver. They sat their horses with straight backs. Thin red streamers fluttered beneath the heads of their lances, every lance held at the same angle. Some of them glanced into the cart as they passed in 2 columns. A cage of steel bars masked each face. Rand was glad his cloak covered his sword. A few nodded to Master Kinch, not as if they knew him, but in a neutral greeting. Master Kinch nodded back in much the same way, but despite his unchanging expression, there was a hint of approval in his nod. Their horses were at a walk, but with the speed of the cart added, they went by quickly. With a part of his mind, Rand counted them. 10, 20, 22, 30, 32. He raised his head to watch the columns move on down the Caemlyn road. Who were they? Matt asked, half wondering, half suspicious. Queen's guards, Master Kinch said around his pipe. He kept his eyes on the road ahead. Won't go much further than Breen Spring, less they're called for. Not like the old days. He sucked on his pipe, then added, I suppose these days there's parts of the realm don't see the guards in a year or more. Not like the old days. What are they doing? Rand asked. The farmer gave him a look, keeping the Queen's peace and upholding the Queen's law. He nodded to himself as if he liked the sound of that, and added, searching out malefactors and seeing them before a magistrate. Emph, he let out a long streamer of smoke. You two must be from pretty far off not to recognize the Queen's Guard. Where you from? Far off, Matt said at the same instant that Rand said, the 2 rivers. He wished he could take it back as soon as he said it. He still was not thinking clearly. Trying to hide, and mentioning a name a Fade would hear like a bell. Master Kinch glanced at Matt out of the corner of his eye and puffed his pipe in silence for a while. That's far off all right, he said finally. Almost to the border of the realm. But things must be worse than I thought, if there's places in the realm where people don't even recognize the Queen's guards. Not like the old days at all. Rand wondered what Master Olvere would say if someone told him the 2 rivers was part of some Queen's realm. The Queen of Andor, he supposed. Perhaps the mayor did know. He knew a lot of things that surprised Rand, and maybe others did too, but he had never heard anyone mention it. The 2 rivers was the 2 rivers. Each village handled its own problems, and if some difficulty involved more than one village, the mayors, and maybe the village councils, solved it between them. Master Kinch pulled on the reins, drawing the cart to a halt. Far as I go. A narrow cart path led off to the north. Several farmhouses were visible in that direction, across open fields, ploughed but still bare of crops. 2 days will see you in Caemlyn. Least it would if your friend had his legs under him. Matt hopped down and retrieved his bow and other things, then helped Rand climb off the tail of the cart. Rand's bundles weighed on him and his legs wobbled, but he shrugged off his friend's hand and tried a few steps on his own. He still felt unsteady, but his legs held him up. They even seemed to grow stronger as he used them. The farmer did not start his horse up again right away. He studied them for a minute, sucking on his pipe. You can rest up a day or 2 at my place if you want. Won't miss anything in that time, I suppose. Whatever sickness you're getting over, young fellow. Well, the old woman and me, we already had about every sickness you can think of before you were born, and nursed our younglings through 'em too. I expect you're past the catching stage anyway. Matt's eyes narrowed, and Rand caught himself frowning. Not everyone is part of it. It can't be everybody. Thank you, he said, but I'm all right. Really? How far to the next village? Carrisford? You can reach it before dark, walking. Master Kinch took his pipe from between his teeth and pursed his lips thoughtfully before going on. First off, I reckoned you for runaway prentices, but now I expect it's something more serious you're running from. Don't know what. Don't care. I'm a good enough judge to say you're not Darkfriends, and not likely to rob or hurt anybody. Not like some on the road these days. I got in trouble a time or 2 myself when I was your age. You need a place to keep out of sight a few days. My farm is 5 miles that way. He jerked his head toward the cart track. And don't nobody ever come out there. Whatever's chasing you won't likely find you there. He cleared his throat as if embarrassed by speaking so many words together. How would you know what Darkfriends look like? Matt demanded. He backed away from the cart, and his hand went under his coat. What do you know about Darkfriends? Master Kinch's face tightened. Suit yourselves, he said, and clucked to his horse. The cart rolled off down the narrow path, and he never looked back. Matt looked at Rand, and his scowl faded. Sorry, Rand. You need a place to rest. Maybe if we go after him. He shrugged. I just can't get over the feeling that everybody's after us. Light, I wish I knew why they were. I wish it was over. I wish... He trailed off miserably. There are still some good people, Rand said. Matt started toward the cart path, jaw clenched, as if it were the last thing he wanted to do, but Rand stopped him. We can't afford to stop just to rest, Matt. Besides, I don't think there is anywhere to hide. Matt nodded, his relief evident. He tried to take some of Rand's burdens, the saddlebags and Thom's cloak wrapped around the cased harp, but Rand held onto them. His legs really did feel stronger. Whatever's chasing us, he thought as they started off down the road. Not chasing, waiting. The rain had continued through the night. They staggered away from the dancing cartmen, hammering at them as hard as the thunder out of a black sky split by lightning. Their clothes became sodden in minutes, in an hour. Rand's skin felt sodden too, but they had left 4 kings behind them. Matt was all but blind in the dark, squinting painfully at the sharp flashes that made trees stand out starkly for an instant. Rand led him by the hand, but Matt still felt out each step uncertainly. Worry creased Rand's forehead. If Matt did not regain his sight, they would be slowed to a crawl. They would never get away. Matt seemed to sense his thought. Despite the hood of his cloak, the rain had plastered Matt's hair across his face. "Rand," he said, "you won't leave me, will you?" "If I can't keep up," his voice quavered. "I won't leave you." Rand tightened his grip on his friend's hand. "I won't leave you no matter what. Light, help us." Thunder crashed overhead, and Matt stumbled, almost falling, almost pulling him down too. "We have to stop, Matt. If we keep going, you'll break a leg." Gode. Lightning split the dark right above them as Matt spoke, and the thunder crack pounded every other sound into the ground, but in the flash, Rand could make out the name on Matt's lips. "He's dead. He has to be. Light, let him be dead." He led Matt to some bushes the lightning flash had showed him. They had leaves enough to give a little shelter from the driving rain. Not as much as a good tree might, but he did not want to risk another lightning strike. They might not be so lucky next time. Huddled together beneath the bushes, they tried to arrange their cloaks to make a little tent over the branches. It was far too late to think of staying dry, but just stopping the incessant pelting of the raindrops would be something. They crouched against each other to share what little body warmth was left of them. Dripping wet as they were, and more drips coming through the cloaks, they shivered themselves into sleep. Bran knew right away it was a dream. He was back in 4 Kings, but the town was empty except for him. The wagons were there, but no people, no horses, no dogs, nothing alive. He knew someone was waiting for him, though. As he walked down the rutted street, the buildings seemed to blur as they slid behind him. When he turned his head, they were all there, solid, but the indistinctness remained at the corners of his vision. It was as if only what he saw really existed, and then, just while he was seeing, he was sure if he turned quickly enough he would see. He was not sure what, but it made him uneasy, thinking about it. The dancing cartman appeared in front of him. Somehow its garish paint seemed grey and lifeless. He went in. Gode was there, at a table. He only recognized the man from his clothes, his silk and dark velvets. Gode's skin was red, burned and cracked and oozing. His face was almost a skull, his lips shriveled to bare teeth and gums. As Gode turned his head, some of his hair cracked off, powdering to soot when it hit his shoulder. His lidless eyes stared at Rand. "So you are dead," Rand said. He was surprised that he was not afraid. Perhaps it was knowing that it was a dream this time. "Yes," said Balzamon's voice, "but he did find you for me. That deserves some reward, don't you think?" Rand turned and discovered he could be afraid even knowing it was a dream. Balzamon's clothes were the color of dried blood, and rage and hate and triumph battled on his face. "You see, youngling, you cannot hide from me forever. One way or another, I find you. What protects you also makes you vulnerable. One time you hide, the next you light a signal fire. Come to me, youngling." He held out his hand to Rand. "If my hounds must pull you down, they may not be gentle. They are jealous of what you will be once you have knelt at my feet. It is your destiny. You belong to me." Gode's burned tongue made an angry, eager garble of sound. Rand tried to wet his lips, but he had no spit in his mouth. "No," he managed, and then the words came more easily. "I belong to myself. Not you, not ever. Myself. If your dark friends kill me, you'll never have me." The fires in Balzamon's face heated the room till the air swam. "Alive or dead, youngling, you are mine. The grave belongs to me. Easier dead, but better alive. Better for you, youngling. The living have more power in most things. Gode made a gabbling sound again. Yes, my good hound, here is your reward. Rand looked at Gode just in time to see the man's body crumble to dust. For an instant, the burned face held a look of sublime joy that turned to horror in the final moment, as if he had seen something waiting he did not expect. Gode's empty velvet garments settled on the chair and the floor among the ash. When he turned back, Baalzamon's outstretched hand had become a fist. You are mine, youngling, alive or dead. The eye of the world will never serve you. I mark you as mine. His fist opened, and a ball of flame shot out. It struck Rand in the face, exploding, searing. Rand lurched awake in the dark, water dripping through the cloaks onto his face. His hand trembled as he touched his cheeks. The skin felt tender, as if sunburned. Suddenly he realized Matt was twisting and moaning in his sleep. He shook him, and Matt came awake with a whimper. "It's my eyes. Oh, light, my eyes." He took my eyes. Rand held him close, cradling him against his chest as if he were a baby. "You're all right, Matt. You're all right. He can't hurt us. We won't let him." He could feel Matt shaking, sobbing into his coat. "He can't hurt us," he whispered, and wished he believed it. "What protects you makes you vulnerable. I am going mad." Just before first light, the downpour dwindled, the last drizzle fading as dawn came. The clouds remained, threatening until well into the morning. The wind came up then, driving the clouds off to the south, bearing a warmthless sun and slicing through their dripping wet clothes. They had not slept again, but groggily they donned their cloaks and set off eastward, Rand leading Matt by the hand. After a while, Matt even felt well enough to complain about what the rain had done to his bowstring. Rand would not let him stop to exchange it for a dry string from his pocket, though not yet. They came on another village shortly after midday. Rand shivered harder at the sight of snug brick houses and smoke rising from chimneys, but he kept clear, leading Matt through the woods and fields to the south. A lone farmer working with a spading fork in a muddy field was the only person he saw, and he took care that the man did not see them, crouching through the trees. The farmer's attention was all on his work, but Rand kept one eye on him till he was lost to sight. If any of Gode's men were alive, perhaps they would believe he and Matt had taken the southern road out of Four Kings when they could not find anyone who had seen them in this village. They came back to the road out of sight of the town and walked their clothes, if not dry, at least to just damp. An hour beyond the town, a farmer gave them a ride in his half-empty hay wain. Rand had been taken by surprise while lost in worry about Matt. Matt shielded his eyes from the sun with his hand, weak as the afternoon light was, squinting through slitted lids even so, and he muttered continually about how bright the sun was. When Rand heard the rumble of the hay wain, it was too late already. The sodden road deadened sound, and the wagon with its two-horse hitch was only 50 yards behind them, the driver already peering at them. To Rand's surprise, he drew up and offered them a lift. Rand hesitated, but it was too late to avoid being seen, and refusing a ride might fix them in the man's mind. He helped Matt up to the seat beside the farmer, then climbed up behind him. Alpert Mull was a stolid man with a square face and square hands, both worn and grooved from hard work and worry, and he wanted someone to talk to. His cows had gone dry, his chickens had stopped laying, and there was no pasture worth the name. For the first time in memory he had had to buy hay, and half a wagon was all Old Bane would let him have. He wondered whether there was any chance of getting hay on his own land this year, or any kind of crop. The Queen should do something, the light illumine her, he muttered, knuckling his forehead respectfully but absent-mindedly. He hardly looked at Rand or Matt, but when he let them down by the narrow rail-lined track that led off to his farm, he hesitated, then said, almost as if to himself, "I don't know what you're running from, and I don't want to. I have a wife and children, you understand, my family. It's hard times for helping strangers." Matt tried to stick his hand under his coat, but Rand had his wrist and he held on. He stood in the road, looking at the man without speaking. "If I was a good man," Mull said, "I'd offer a couple of lads soaked to the skin, a place to dry out and get warm in front of my fire. But it's hard times, and strangers. I don't know what you're running from, and I don't want to. You understand? My family." Suddenly he pulled 2 long woolen scarves, dark and thick, out of his coat pocket. "Here's not much, but here belong to my boys. They have others. You don't know me, understand? It's hard times. We never even saw you, Rand agreed as he took the scarves. You are a good man, the best we've met in days. The farmer looked surprised, then grateful. Gathering his reins, he turned his horses down the narrow lane. Before he completed the turn, Rand was leading Mat on down the Caemlyn road. The wind stiffened as dusk closed in. Mat began to ask querulously when they were going to stop, but Rand kept moving, pulling Mat behind him, searching for more shelter than a spot under a hedge. With their clothes still clammy and the wind getting colder by the minute, he was not sure they could survive another night in the open. Night fell without him spotting anything useful. The wind grew icy, beating his cloak. Then, through the darkness ahead, he saw lights, a village. His hand slid into his pocket, feeling the coins there. More than enough for a meal and a room for the two of them. A room out of the cold night. If they stayed in the open, in the wind and cold and damp clothes, anyone who found them would likely as not find only 2 corpses. They just had to keep from attracting any more notice than they could help. No playing the flute, and with his eyes Mat certainly could not juggle. He grasped Mat's hand again and set out toward the beckoning lights. "When are we going to stop?" Mat asked again. The way he peered ahead, with his head stuck forward, Rand was not sure if Mat could see him, much less the village lights. "When we're somewhere warm," he replied. Pools of light from house windows lit the streets of the town, and people walked them unconcerned with what might be out in the dark. The only inn was a sprawling building, all on one floor, with the look of having had rooms added in bunches over the years without any particular plan. The front door opened to let someone out, and a wave of laughter rolled out after him. Rand froze in the street, the drunken laughter of the dancing cartman echoing in his head. He watched the man go down the street with a none too steady stride, then took a deep breath and pushed the door open. He took care that his cloak covered his sword. Laughter swept over him. Lamps hanging from the high ceiling made the room bright, and right away he could see and feel the difference from Sam'l Hake's inn. There was no drunkenness here, for one thing. The room was filled with people who looked to be farmers and townsmen, if not entirely sober, not too far from it. The laughter was real, if a bit forced around the edges. People laughing to forget their troubles, but with true mirth in it too. The common room itself was neat and clean, and warm from a fire roaring in a big fireplace at the far end. The serving maid's smiles were as warm as the fire, and when they laughed, Rand could tell it was because they wanted to. The innkeeper was as clean as his inn, with a gleaming white apron around his bulk. Rand was glad to see he was a stout man. He doubted if he would ever again trust a skinny innkeeper. His name was Ruran Allwine. A good omen, Rand thought, with so much of the sound of Eamon's Field to it. And he eyed them up and down, then politely mentioned paying in advance. Not suggesting you're the sort, understand, but there's some on the road these days aren't too particular about paying up come morning. Seems to be a lot of young folks headed for Caemlyn. Rand was not offended, not as damp and bedraggled as he was. When Master Allwine mentioned the price, though, his eyes widened, and Mat made a sound as if he had choked on something. The innkeeper's jowls swung as he shook his head regretfully, but he seemed to be used to it. "Times are hard," he said in a resigned voice. "There isn't much, and what there is costs 5 times what it used to. It'll be more next month, I'll lay oath on it." Rand dug his money out and looked at Mat. Mat's mouth tightened stubbornly. "You want to sleep under a hedge?" Rand asked. Mat sighed and reluctantly emptied his pocket. When the reckoning was paid, Rand grimaced at the little that remained to divide with Mat. But 10 minutes later they were eating stew at a table in a corner near the fireplace, pushing it onto their spoons with chunks of bread. The portions were not as large as Rand could have wished, but they were hot and filling. Warmth from the hearth seeped into him slowly. He pretended to keep his eyes on his plate, but he watched the door intently. Those who came in or went out all looked like farmers, but it was not enough to quiet his fear. Mat ate slowly, savouring each bite, though he muttered about the light from the lamps. After a time he dug out the scarf Alpert Mull had given him and wound it around his forehead, pulling it down until his eyes were almost hidden. That got them some looks Rand wished they could have avoided. He cleaned his plate hurriedly, urging Mat to do the same, then asked Master Allwine for their room. The innkeeper seemed surprised that they were retiring so early, but he made no comment. He got a candle and showed them through a jumble of corridors to a small room with 2 narrow beds, back in a far corner of the inn. When he left, Rand dropped his bundles beside his bed, tossed his cloak over a chair, and fell on the coverlet, fully dressed. All of his clothes were still damp and uncomfortable, but if they had to run, he wanted to be ready. He left the sword belt on, too, and slept with his hand on the hilt. A rooster crowing jerked him awake in the morning. He lay there, watching dawn lighten the window, and wondered if he dared sleep a little longer. Sleep during daylight when they could be moving. A yawn made his jaws crack. "Hey," Matt exclaimed, "I can see." He sat up on his bed, squinting around the room. "Some, anyway. Your face is still a little blurry, but I can tell who you are. I knew I'd be all right. By tonight I'll see better than you do. Again." Rand sprang out of bed, scratching as he scooped up his cloak. His clothes were wrinkled from drying on him while he slept, and they itched. "We're wasting daylight," he said. Matt scrambled up as fast as he had. He was scratching too. Rand did feel good. They were a day away from Four Kings, and none of Gode's men had showed up. A day closer to Caemlyn, where Moiraine would be waiting for them. She would. No more worrying about Darkfriends once they were back with the Aes Sedai and the Warder. It was strange to be looking forward so much to being with an Aes Sedai. Light. When I see Moiraine again, I'll kiss her. He laughed at the thought. He felt good enough to invest some of their dwindling stock of coins in breakfast, a big loaf of bread and a pitcher of milk, cold from the spring house. They were eating in the back of the common room when a young man came in, a village youth by the look of him, with a cocky spring to his walk and twirling a cloth cap with a feather in it on one finger. The only other person in the room was an old man sweeping out. He never looked up from his broom. The young man's eyes swept jauntily around the room, but when they lit on Rand and Matt, the cap fell off his finger. He stared at them for a full minute before snatching the cap from the floor, then stared some more, running his fingers through his thick head of dark curls. Finally he came over to their table, his feet dragging. He was older than Rand, but he stood looking down at them diffidently. "Mind if I sit down?" he asked, and immediately swallowed hard as if he might have said the wrong thing. Rand thought he might be hoping to share their breakfast, though he looked able to buy his own. His blue striped shirt was embroidered around the collar, and his dark blue cloak all around the hem. His leather boots had never been near any work that scuffed them that Rand could see. He nodded to a chair. Matt stared at the fellow as he drew the chair to the table. Rand could not tell if he was glaring or just trying to see clearly. In any case, Matt's frown had an effect. The young man froze halfway to sitting, and did not lower himself all the way until Rand nodded again. "What's your name?" Rand asked. My name, call me Paita." His eyes shifted nervously. This is not my idea, you understand. I have to do it. I didn't want to, but they made me. You have to understand that." "I don't." Rand was beginning to tense when Matt growled, "Darkfriend." Paita gave a jerk and half lifted out of his chair, staring wildly around the room as if there were 50 people to overhear. The old man's head was still bent over the broom, his attention on the floor. Paita sat back down and looked from Rand to Matt and back uncertainly. Sweat beaded on his upper lip. It was accusation enough to make anyone sweat, but he said not a word against it. Rand shook his head slowly. After Gode, he knew that Darkfriends did not necessarily have the dragon's fang on their foreheads, but except for his clothes, this Paita could have fit right in Emon's field. Nothing about him hinted at murder, and worse, nobody would have remarked him twice. At least Gode had been. "Different. Leave us alone," Rand said. "And tell your friends to leave us alone. We want nothing from them, and they'll get nothing from us." "If you don't," Matt added fiercely, "I'll name you for what you are. See what your village friends think of that." Rand hoped he did not really mean it. That could cause as much trouble for the two of them as it did for Paita. Paita seemed to take the threat seriously. His face grew pale. Buy beer." "I heard what happened at Four Kings. Some of it anyway. Word travels. We have ways of hearing things. But there's nobody here to trap you. I'm alone, and I just want to talk." "About what?" Matt asked at the same time that Rand said, "We're not interested." They looked at each other, and Matt shrugged. "We're not interested," he said. Rand gulped the last of the milk and stuffed the heel of his half of the bread into his pocket. With their money almost gone, it might be their next meal. How to leave the inn. If Paita discovered that Matt was almost blind, he would tell others. Other Darkfriends. Once Rand had seen a wolf separate a crippled sheep from the flock. There were other wolves around, and he could neither leave the flock nor get a clear shot with his bow. As soon as the sheep was alone, bleating with terror, hobbling frantically on 3 legs, the one wolf chasing it became 10, as if by magic. The memory of it turned his stomach. They could not stay there either. Even if Peiter was telling the truth about being alone, how long would he stay that way? "Time to go, Matt," he said, and held his breath. As Matt started to stand, he pulled Peiter's eyes to himself by leaning forward and saying, "Leave us alone, dark friend. I won't tell you again. Leave us alone." Peiter swallowed hard and pressed back in his chair. There was no blood left in his face at all. It made Rand think of a Myrddraal. By the time he looked back at Matt, Matt was on his feet, his awkwardness unseen. Rand hastily hung his own saddlebags and other bundles around him, trying to keep his cloak over the sword as he did. Maybe Peiter already knew about it. Maybe Gode had told Baaltamon, and Baaltamon had told Peiter, but he did not think so. He thought Peiter had only the vaguest idea of what had happened in Four Kings. That was why he was so frightened. The comparatively bright outline of the door helped Matt to make a beeline for it, if not quickly, then not slow enough to seem unnatural either. Rand followed closely, praying for him not to stumble. He was thankful Matt had a clear, straight path, with no tables or chairs in the way. Behind him, Peiter suddenly leaped to his feet. "Wait," he said desperately. "You have to wait. Leave us alone," Rand said without looking back. They were almost to the door, and Matt had not put a foot wrong yet. "Just listen to me," Peiter said, and put his hand on Rand's shoulder to stop him. Images spun in his head. The Trolloc, Narg, leaping at him in his own home. The Myrddraal threatening at the stag and lion in Baerlon. Halfmen everywhere, Fades chasing them to Shadar Logoth, coming for them in Whitebridge. Darkfriends everywhere. He whirled, his hand balling up. I said, "Leave us alone." His fist took Peiter flush on the nose. The Darkfriend fell on his bottom and sat there on the floor, staring at Rand. Blood trickled from his nose. "You won't get away," he spat angrily. "No matter how strong you are, the great Lord of the Dark is stronger. The shadow will swallow you." There was a gasp from further into the common room and the clatter of a broom handle hitting the floor. The old man with the broom had finally heard. He stood staring wide-eyed at Peiter. The blood drained from his wrinkled face and his mouth worked, but no sound came out. Peiter stared back for an instant, then gave a wild curse and sprang to his feet, darting out of the inn and down the street as if starving wolves were at his heels. The old man shifted his attention to Rand and Matt, looking not a whit less frightened. Rand hustled Matt out of the inn and out of the village as fast as he could, listening all the while for a hue and cry that never came but was no less loud in his ears for that. "Blood and ashes," Matt growled. "They're always there, always right on our heels. We'll never get away." "No, they're not," Rand said. "If Baaltamon knew we were here, do you think he'd have left it to that fellow? There'd have been another Gode, and 20 or 30 bully boys. They're still hunting, but they won't know until Peiter tells them, and maybe he really is alone. He might have to go all the way to Four Kings, for all we know. But he said, 'I don't care.' He was unsure which Matt meant, but it changed nothing. We're not going to lie down and let them take us." They got 6 rides, short ones, during the day. A farmer told them that a crazy old man at the inn in Market Sherrin was claiming there were Darkfriends in the village. The farmer could hardly talk for laughing. He kept wiping tears off his cheeks. Darkfriends in Market Sherrin. It was the best story he had heard since Ackley Farron got drunk and spent the night on the inn roof. Another man, a round-faced wagon-wright with tools hanging from the sides of his cart and 2 wagon wheels in the back, told a different story. 20 Darkfriends had held a gathering in Market Sherrin. Men with twisted bodies, and the women worse, all dirty and in rags. They could make your knees grow weak and your stomach heave just by looking at you, and when they laughed, the filthy cackles rang in your ears for hours, and your head felt as if it were splitting open. He had seen them himself, just at a distance, far enough off to be safe. If the Queen would not do something, then somebody ought to ask the Children of the Light for help. Somebody should do something. It was a relief when the wagon-wright let them down. With the sun low behind them, they walked into a small village, much like Market Sherrin. The Caemlyn road split the town neatly in 2, but on both sides of the wide road stood rows of small brick houses with thatched roofs. Webs of vine covered the bricks, though only a few leaves hung on them. The village had one inn, a small place no bigger than the Wine Spring Inn, with a sign on a bracket out front, creaking back and forth in the wind. The Queen's Man. Strange to think of the Wine Spring Inn as small. Rand could remember when he thought it was about as big as a building could be. Anything bigger would be a palace. But he had seen a few things now, and suddenly he realized that nothing would look the same to him when he got back home. If you ever do. He hesitated in front of the inn, but even if prices at the Queen's Man were not as high as in Market Sharon, they could not afford a meal or a room, either one. Matt saw where he was looking and patted the pocket where he kept Thom's coloured balls. I can see well enough as long as I don't try to get too fancy. His eyes had been getting better, though he still wore the scarf around his forehead and had squinted whenever he looked at the sky during the day. When Rand said nothing, Matt went on, "There can't be Darkfriends at every inn between here and Caemlyn. Besides, I don't want to sleep under a bush if I can sleep in a bed." He made no move toward the inn, though, just stood waiting for Rand. After a moment, Rand nodded. He felt as tired as he had at any time since leaving home. Just thinking of a night in the open made his bones ache. It's all catching up, all the running, all the looking over your shoulder. They can't be everywhere, he agreed. With the first step he took into the common room, he wondered if he had made a mistake. It was a clean place, but crowded. Every table was filled, and some men leaned against the walls because there was nowhere for them to sit. From the way the serving maids scurried between the tables with harried looks, and the landlord too, it was a larger crowd than they were used to. Too many for this small village. It was easy to pick out the people who did not belong there. They were dressed no differently from the rest, but they kept their eyes on their food and drink. The locals watched the strangers as much as anything else. A drone of conversation hung in the air, enough that the innkeeper took them into the kitchen when Rand made him understand that they needed to talk to him. The noise was almost as bad there, with the cook and his helpers banging pots and darting about. The innkeeper mopped his face with a large handkerchief. "I suppose you're on your way to Caemlyn to see the false dragon like every other fool in the realm. Well, it's 6 to a room and 2 or 3 to a bed, and if that doesn't suit, I've nothing for you." Rand gave his spiel with a feeling of queasiness. With so many people on the road, every other one could be a Darkfriend, and there was no way to pick them out from the rest. Matt demonstrated his juggling. He kept it to 3 balls, and was careful even then. And Rand took out Thom's flute. After only a dozen notes of "The Old Black Bear," the innkeeper nodded impatiently. "You'll do. I need something to take those idiots' minds off this Logain. There's been 3 fights already over whether or not he's really the dragon. Stow your things in the corner, and I'll go clear a space for you. If there's any room to, fools. The world's full of fools who don't know enough to stay where they belong. That's what's causing all the trouble. People who won't stay where they belong." Mopping his face again, he hurried out of the kitchen, muttering under his breath. The cook and his helpers ignored Rand and Matt. Matt kept adjusting the scarf around his head, pushing it up, then blinking at the light and tugging it back down again. Rand wondered if he could see well enough to do anything more complicated than juggle 3 balls. As for himself, the queasiness in his stomach grew thicker. He dropped on a low stool, holding his head in his hands. The kitchen felt cold. He shivered. Steam filled the air. Stoves and ovens crackled with heat. His shivers became stronger, his teeth chattering. He wrapped his arms around himself, but it did no good. His bones felt as if they were freezing. Dimly he was aware of Matt asking him something, shaking his shoulder, and of someone cursing and running out of the room. Then the innkeeper was there, with the cook frowning at his side, and Matt was arguing loudly with them both. He could not make out any of what they said. The words were a buzz in his ears, and he could not seem to think at all. Suddenly Matt took his arm, pulling him to his feet. All of their things, saddlebags, blanket rolls, Thom's bundled cloak and instrument cases, hung from Matt's shoulders with his bow. The innkeeper was watching them, wiping his face anxiously. Weaving, more than half supported by Matt, Rand let his friend steer him toward the back door. Sorry, Matt, he managed. He could not stop his teeth from chattering. M must have. B, Bean, the E.T., the Arborators, Rain, 01, Mamor. Night out. W, won't H hurt. I guess. Twilight darkened the sky, spotted by a handful of stars. Not a bit of it, Matt said. He was trying to sound cheerful, but Rand could hear the hidden worry. He was scared the other folk would find out there was somebody sick in his inn. I told him if he kicked us out, I'd take you into the common room. That'd empty half his rooms in 10 minutes. For all his talk about fools, he doesn't want that. Then, where? Here, Matt said, pulling open the stable door with a loud creak of hinges. It was darker inside than out, and the air smelled of hay and grain and horses, with a strong undersmell of manure. When Matt lowered him to the straw-covered floor, he folded over with his chest on his knees, still hugging himself and shaking from head to toe. All of his strength seemed to go for the shaking. He heard Matt stumble and curse and stumble again, then a clatter of metal. Suddenly, light blossomed. Matt held up a battered old lantern. If the inn was full, so was its stable. Every stall had a horse, some raising their heads and blinking at the light. Matt eyed the ladder to the hayloft, then looked at Rand, crouched on the floor, and shook his head. "Never get you up there," Matt muttered. Hanging the lantern on a nail, he scrambled up the ladder and began tossing down armloads of hay. Hurriedly climbing back down, he made a bed at the back of the stable and got Rand onto it. Matt covered him with both their cloaks, but Rand pushed them off almost immediately. "Hot," he murmured. Vaguely he knew that he had been cold only a moment before, but now he felt as if he were in an oven. He tugged at his collar, tossing his head. "Hot." He felt Matt's hand on his forehead. "I'll be right back," Matt said, and disappeared. He twisted fitfully on the hay, how long he was not sure, until Matt returned with a heaped plate in one hand, a pitcher in the other, and 2 white cups dangling from fingers by their handles. "There's no wisdom here," he said, dropping to his knees beside Rand. He filled one of the cups and held it to Rand's mouth. Rand gulped the water down as if he had had nothing to drink in days. That was how he felt. They don't even know what a wisdom is. What they do have is somebody called Mother Brune, but she's off somewhere birthing a baby, and nobody knows when she'll be back. I did get some bread and cheese and sausage. Good Master Inlo will give us anything as long as we stay out of sight of his guests. Here, try some." Rand turned his head away from the food. The sight of it, the thought of it, made his stomach heave. After a minute, Matt sighed and settled down to eat himself. Rand kept his eyes averted and tried not to listen. The chills came once more, and then the fever, to be replaced by the chills and the fever again. Matt covered him when he shook, and fed him water when he complained of thirst. The night deepened, and the stable shifted in the flickering lantern light. Shadows took shape and moved on their own. Then he saw Bar-Alzamon striding down the stable, eyes burning, a murd-roll at either side with faces hidden in the depths of their black cowls. Fingers scrabbling for his sword hilt, he tried to get to his feet, yelling, "Matt! Matt! They're here! Light, they're here!" Matt jerked awake where he sat cross-legged against the wall. "What? Darkfriends? Where?" Wavering on his knees, Rand pointed frantically down the stable and gaped. Shadows stirred, and a horse stamped in its sleep. Nothing more. He fell back on the straw. "There's nobody but us," Matt said. "Here, let me take that." He reached for Rand's sword belt, but Rand tightened his grip on the hilt. No, I have to keep it. He's my father. You understand? He's my father." The shivering swept over him once more, but he clung to the sword as if to a lifeline. Father." Matt gave up trying to take it and pulled the cloaks back over him. There were other visitations in the night while Matt dozed. Rand was never sure if they were really there or not. Sometimes he looked at Matt with his head on his chest, wondering if he would see them too if he woke. Egwene stepped out of the shadows, her hair in a long, dark braid, as it had been in Emond's field, her face pained and mournful. "Why did you leave us?" she asked. "We're dead because you left us." Rand shook his head weakly on the hay. "No, Egwene, I didn't want to leave you. Please. We're all dead," she said sadly, "and death is the kingdom of the Dark One. The Dark One has us because you abandoned us." "No, I had no choice, Egwene. Please, Egwene, don't go. Come back, Egwene." But she turned into the shadows and was shadow. Moraine's expression was serene, but her face was bloodless and pale. Her cloak might as well have been a shroud, and her voice was a lash. "That is right, Randall Thor. You have no choice. You must go to Tar Valon, or the Dark One will take you for his own. Eternity chained in the shadow. Only Aes Sedai can save you. Now, Only Sedai. Thom grinned at him sardonically. The gleeman's clothes hung in charred rags that made him see the flashes of light as Thom wrestled with the fade to give them time to run. The flesh under the rags was blackened and burned. Trusty Sedai, boy, and you'll wish you were dead. Remember, the price of Sedai help is always smaller than you can believe, always greater than you can imagine. And what Ajar will find you first, eh? Red? Maybe black. Best to run, boy. Run. Lan's stare was as hard as granite, and blood covered his face. Strange to see a heron-mark blade in the hands of a sheepherder. Are you worthy of it? You had better be. You're alone now. Nothing to hold to behind you, and nothing before, and anyone can be a Darkfriend. He smiled, a wolf's smile, and blood poured but of his mouth. Anyone. Perrin came, accusing, pleading for help. Mistress Olvir weeping for her daughter, and Bael Domon cursing him for bringing fades down on his vessel, and Master Fitch wringing his hands over the ashes of his inn, and Min screaming in a Trollocs' clutches, people he knew, people he had only met. But the worst was Tam. Tam stood over him, frowning and shaking his head, and said not a word. "You have to tell me," Rand begged him. "Who am I? Tell me, please. Who am I? Who am I?" he shouted. "Easy, Rand." For a moment he thought it was Tam answering, but then he saw that Tam was gone. Matt bent over him, holding a cup of water to his lips. "Just rest easy. You're Randall Thor, that's who you are, with the ugliest face and the thickest head in the 2 rivers. Hey, you're sweating. The fever's broken. Randall Thor," Rand whispered. Matt nodded, and there was something so comforting in it that Rand drifted off to sleep without even touching the water. It was a sleep untroubled by dreams, at least by any he remembered, but light enough that his eyes drifted open whenever Matt checked on him. Once he wondered if Matt was getting any sleep at all, but he fell back asleep himself before the thought got very far. The squeal of the door hinges roused him fully, but for a moment he only lay there in the hay, wishing he was still asleep. Asleep, he would not be aware of his body. His muscles ached like wrung-out rags, and had about as much strength. Weakly he tried to raise his head. He made it on the second try. Matt sat in his accustomed place against the wall, within arm's reach of Rand. His chin rested on his chest, which rose and fell in the easy rhythm of deep sleep. The scarf had slipped down over his eyes. Rand looked toward the door. A woman stood there, holding it open with one hand. For a moment she was only a dark shape in a dress, outlined by the faint light of early morning. Then she stepped inside, letting the door swing shut behind her. In the lantern light, he could see her more clearly. She was about the same age as Nynaeve, he thought, but she was no village woman. The pale green silk of her dress shimmered as she moved. Her cloak was a rich, soft grey, and a frothy net of lace caught up her hair. She fingered a heavy gold necklace as she looked thoughtfully at Matt and him. "Matt," Rand said, then louder, "Matt!" Matt snorted and almost fell over as he came awake. Scrubbing sleep from his eyes, he stared at the woman. "I came to look at my horse," she said, gesturing vaguely at the stalls. She never took her eyes away from the 2 of them, though. "Are you ill?" "He's all right," Matt said stiffly. "He just caught a chill in the rain, that's all." "Perhaps I should look at him," she said. "I have some knowledge." Brand wondered if she were Aes Sedai. Even more than her clothes, her self-assured manner, the way she held her head as if on the point of giving a command, did not belong here. And if she is Aes Sedai, of what Ajar? "I'm fine now," he told her. "Really, there's no need." But she came down the length of the stable, holding her skirt up and placing her grey slippers gingerly. With a grimace for the straw, she knelt beside him and felt his forehead. "No fever," she said, studying him with a frown. She was pretty in a sharp-featured fashion, but there was no warmth in her face. It was not cold either, it just seemed to lack any feeling whatsoever. "You were sick, though?" Yes, and still weak as a day-old kitten, I think." She reached under her cloak, and suddenly things were happening too fast for Rand to do more than give a strangled shout. Her hand flashed from under her cloak. Something glittered as she lunged across Rand toward Matt. Matt toppled sideways in a flurry of motion, and there was a solid chunk of metal driven into wood. It all took just an instant, and then everything was still. Matt lay half on his back, one hand gripping her wrist just above the dagger she had driven into the wall where his chest had been, his other hand holding the blade from Shadar Logoth to her throat. Moving nothing but her eyes, she tried to look down at the dagger Matt held. Eyes widening, she drew a ragged breath and tried to pull back from it, but he kept the edge against her skin. After that, she was as still as a stone. Licking his lips, Rand stared at the tableau above him. Even if he had not been so weak, he did not believe he could have moved. Then his eyes fell on her dagger, and his mouth went dry. The wood around the blade was blackening. Thin tendrils of smoke rose from the char. Matt, her dagger. Matt flicked a glance at the dagger, then back to the woman, but she had not moved. She was licking her lips nervously. Roughly, Matt pried her hand off the hilt and gave her a push. She toppled back, sprawling away from them, and catching herself with her hands behind her, still watching the blade in his hand. "Don't move," he said. "I'll use this if you move. Believe me, I will." She nodded slowly. Her eyes never left Matt's dagger. "Watch her, Rand." Rand was not sure what he was supposed to do if she tried anything. Shout, maybe. He certainly could not run after her if she tried to flee. But she sat there without twitching, while Matt yanked her dagger free of the wall. The black spot stopped growing, though a faint wisp of smoke still trailed up from it. Matt looked around for somewhere to put the dagger, then thrust it toward Rand. He took it gingerly, as if it were a live adder. It looked ordinary, if ornate, with a pale ivory hilt and a narrow, gleaming blade no longer than the palm of his hand. Just a dagger. Only he had seen what it could do. The hilt was not even warm, but his hand began to sweat. He hoped he did not drop it in the hay. The woman did not move from her sprawl as she watched Matt slowly turn toward her. She watched him as if wondering what he would do next, but Rand saw the sudden tightening of Matt's eyes, the tightening of his hand on the dagger. "Matt, no. She tried to kill me, Rand. She'd have killed you, too. She's a Darkfriend." Matt spat the word. "But we're not," Ram said. The woman gasped as if she had just realized what Matt had intended. "We are not, Matt." For a moment, Matt remained frozen, the blade in his fist catching the lantern light. Then he nodded. "Move over there," he told the woman, gesturing with the dagger toward the door to the tack room. She got to her feet slowly, pausing to brush the straw from her dress. Even when she started in the direction Matt indicated, she moved as if there were no reason to hurry. But Rand noticed that she kept a wary eye on the ruby-hilted dagger in Matt's hand. "You really should stop struggling," she said. "It would be for the best in the end." "You will see." "The best?" Matt said wryly, rubbing his chest where her blade would have gone if he had not moved. "Get over there." She gave a casual shrug as she obeyed. "A mistake. There has been considerable confusion since what happened with that egotistical fool, Gode, not to mention whoever the idiot was who started the panic in Market Sheran. No one is sure what happened there, or how. That makes it more dangerous for you, don't you see? You would have honored places if you come to the great lord of your own free will, but as long as you run, there will be pursuit, and who can tell what will happen then?" Rand felt a chill. "My hounds are jealous, and may not be gentle. So you're having trouble with a couple of farm boys." Matt's laugh was grim. "Maybe you Darkfriends aren't as dangerous as I've always heard." He flung open the door of the tack room and stepped back. She paused just through the doorway, looking at him over her shoulder. Her gaze was ice, and her voice colder still. "You'll find out how dangerous we are when the Myrddraal gets here." Whatever else she had to say was cut off as Matt slammed the door and pulled the bar down into its brackets. When he turned, his eyes were worried. "Fade," he said in a tight voice, tucking the dagger back under his coat. "Coming here," she says. "How are your legs?" "I can't dance," Rand muttered, "but if you'll help me get on my feet, I can walk." He looked at the blade in his hand and shuddered. "Blood and ashes, I'll run." Hurriedly hanging himself about with their possessions, Matt pulled Rand to his feet. Rand's legs wobbled, and he had to lean on his friend to stay upright, but he tried not to slow Matt down. He held the woman's dagger well away from himself. Outside the door was a bucket of water. He tossed the dagger into it as they passed. The blade entered the water with a hiss. Steam rose from the surface. Grimacing, he tried to take faster steps. With light come, there were plenty of people in the streets even so early. They were about their own business, though, and no one had any attention to spare for two young men walking out of the village, not with so many strangers about. Just the same, Rand stiffened every muscle, trying to stand straight. With each step he wondered if any of the folk hurrying by were Darkfriends. Are any of them waiting for the woman with the dagger? For the Fade? A mile outside the village, his strength gave out. 1 minute he was panting along, hanging on Matt. The next, they were both on the ground. Matt tugged him over to the side of the road. "We have to keep going," Matt said. He scrubbed his hand through his hair, then tugged the scarf down above his eyes. "Sooner or later, somebody will let her out, and they'll be after us again." "I know," Rand panted. "I know. Give me a hand." Matt pulled him up again, but he wavered there, knowing it was no good. The first time he tried to take a step, he would be flat on his face again. Holding him upright, Matt waited impatiently for a horse cart, approaching from the village, to pass them. Matt gave a grunt of surprise when the cart slowed to a stop before them. A leathery-faced man looked down from the driver's seat. "Something wrong with him?" the man asked around his pipe. "He's just tired," Matt said. Rand could see that was not going to do, not leaning on Matt the way he was. He let go of Matt and took a step away from him. His legs quivered, but he willed himself to stay erect. "I haven't slept in 2 days," he said. "Ate something that made me sick. I'm better now, but I haven't slept." The man blew a streamer of smoke from the corner of his mouth. "Going to Caemlyn, are you? Was your age. I expect I might be off to see this false dragon myself." "Yes," Matt nodded. "That's right. We're going to see the false dragon. Well, climb on up then. Your friend in the back. If he's sick again, best it's on the straw, not up here. Name's Hyam Kinch." It was after dark when they reached Carrisford, longer than Rand had thought it would take from what Master Kinch said when he let them down. He wondered if his whole sense of time was getting skewed. Only 3 nights since Howl, Gode and 4 Kings, 2 since Paita had surprised them in Market Sharon. Just a bare day since the nameless Darkfriend woman tried to kill them in the stable of the Queen's man, but even that seemed a year ago, or a lifetime. Whatever was happening to time, Carrisford appeared normal enough on the surface at least. Neat, vine-covered brick houses and narrow lanes, except for the Caemlyn road itself, quiet and outwardly peaceful. But what's underneath? He wondered. Market Sharon had been peaceful to look at, and so had the village where the woman. He had never learned the name of that one, and he did not want to think about it. Light spilled from the windows of the houses into streets all but empty of people. That suited Rand. Slinking from corner to corner, he avoided the few people abroad. Matt stuck to his shoulder, freezing when the crunch of gravel announced the approach of a villager, dodging from shadow to shadow when the dim shape had gone past. The River Carey was a bare 30 paces wide there, and the black water moved sluggishly, but the ford had long since been bridged over. Centuries of rain and wind had worn the stone abutments until they seemed almost like natural formations. Years of freight wagons and merchant trains had ground at the thick wooden planks too. Loose boards rattled under their boots, sounding as loud as drums. Until long after they were through the village and into the countryside beyond, Rand waited for a voice to demand to know who they were. Or worse, knowing who they were. The countryside had been filling up the further they went, becoming more and more settled. There were always the lights of farmhouses in sight. Hedges and rail fences lined the road and the fields beyond. Always the fields were there, and never a stretch of woods close to the road. It seemed as if they were always on the outskirts of a village, even when they were hours from the nearest town. Neat and peaceful, and with never an indication that Darkfriends or worse might be lurking. Abruptly, Matt sat down in the road. He had pushed the scarf up on top of his head, now that the only light came from the moon. 2 paces to the span, he muttered. 1,000 spans to the mile, 4 miles to the league. I'm not walking another 10 paces unless there's a place to sleep at the end of it. Something to eat wouldn't be amiss either. You haven't been hiding anything in your pockets, have you? An apple, maybe? I won't hold it against you if you have. You could at least look. Rand peered down the road both ways. They were the only things moving in the night. He glanced at Matt, who had pulled off one boot and was rubbing his foot. Or they had been. His own feet hurt too. A tremor ran up his legs, as if to tell him he had not yet regained as much strength as he thought. Dark mounds stood in a field just ahead of them. Haystacks, diminished by winter feeding, but still haystacks. He nudged Matt with his toe. We'll sleep there. Haystacks again, Matt sighed, but he tugged on his boot and got up. The wind was rising, the night chill growing deeper. They climbed over the smooth poles of the fence and quickly were burrowing into the hay. The tarp that kept the rain off the hay cut the wind too. Rand twisted around in the hollow he had made until he found a comfortable position. Hay still managed to poke at him through his clothes, but he had learned to put up with that. He tried counting the haystacks he had slept in since Whitebridge. Heroes in the stories never had to sleep in haystacks or under hedges, but it was not easy to pretend anymore that he was a hero in a story, even for a little while. With a sigh, he pulled his collar up in the hopes of keeping Hay from getting down his back. "Rand," Mat said softly. "Rand, do you think we'll make it, Tarvalon? It's a long way yet, but Caemlyn. Do you think we'll make it to Caemlyn?" Rand raised his head, but it was dark in their burrow. The only thing that told him where Mat was his voice. Master Kinch said 2 days. "Day after tomorrow, the next day, we'll get there. If there aren't 100 Darkfriends waiting for us down the road, or a fade or two." There was silence for a moment. Then Mat said, "I think we're the last ones left, Rand." He sounded frightened. "Whatever it's all about, it's just us two now. Just us." Rand shook his head. He knew Mat could not see in the darkness, but it was more for himself than Mat anyway. "Go to sleep, Mat," he said tiredly. But he lay awake a long time himself before sleep came. Just us. A cock's crow woke him, and he scrambled out into the false dawn, brushing hay off his clothes. Despite his precautions, some had worked its way down his back. The straws clung between his shoulder blades, itching. He took off his coat and pulled his shirt out of his breeches to get to it. It was while he had one hand down the back of his neck and the other twisted up behind him that he became aware of the people. The sun was not yet truly up, but already a steady trickle moved down the road in ones and twos, trudging toward Caemlyn, some with packs or bundles on their backs, others with nothing but a walking staff, if that. Most were young men, but here and there was a girl or someone older. One and all they had the travel-stained look of having walked a long way. Some had their eyes on their feet and a weary slump to their shoulders, early as it was. Others had their gaze fixed on something out of sight ahead, something toward the dawn. Mat rolled out of the haystack, scratching vigorously. He only paused long enough to wrap the scarf around his head. It shaded his eyes a little less this morning. "You think we might get something to eat today?" Rand's stomach rumbled in sympathy. "We can think about that when we're on the road," he said. Hastily arranging his clothes, he dug his share of their bundles out of the haystack. By the time they reached the fence, Mat had noticed the people too. He frowned, stopping in the field while Rand climbed over. A young man, not much older than they, glanced at them as he passed. His clothes were dusty, and so was the blanket roll strapped across his back. "Where are you bound?" Mat called. "Why, Caemlyn, for to see the dragon," the fellow shouted back without stopping. He raised an eyebrow at the blankets and saddlebags hanging from their shoulders and added, "Just like you." With a laugh he went on, his eyes already seeking eagerly ahead. Mat asked the same question several times during the day, and the only people who did not give much the same answer were local folk. If those answered at all, it was by spitting and turning away in disgust. They turned away, but they kept a watchful eye too. They looked at all the travellers the same way, out of the corners of their eyes. Their faces said strangers might get up to anything if not watched. People who lived in the area were not only wary of the strangers, they seemed more than a little put out. Just enough people were on the road, scattered out just enough that when farmers' carts and wagons appeared with the sun peeking over the horizon, even their usually slow pace was halved. None of them was in any mood to give a ride. A sour grimace, and maybe a curse for the work they were missing, were more likely. The merchants' wagons rolled by with little hindrance beyond shaken fists, whether they were going toward Caemlyn or away from it. When the first merchant's train appeared early on in the morning, coming at a stiff trot with the sun barely above the horizon behind the wagons, Rand stepped out of the road. They gave no sign of slowing for anything, and he saw other folk scrambling out of the way. He moved all the way over onto the verge, but kept walking. A flicker of motion as the first wagon rumbled close was all the warning he had. He went sprawling on the ground as the wagon driver's whip cracked in the air where his head had been. From where he lay, he met the driver's eyes as the wagon rolled by. Hard eyes above a mouth in a tight grimace. Not a care that he might have drawn blood or taken an eye. "Light blind you," Mat shouted after the wagon. "You can't." A mounted guard caught him on the shoulder with the butt of his spear, knocking him down atop Rand. "Out of the way, you dirty Darkfriend," the guard growled without slowing. After that they kept their distance from the wagons. There were certainly enough of them. The rattle and clatter of one hardly faded before another could be heard coming. Guards and drivers, they all stared at the travellers heading for Caemlyn as if seeing dirt walk. Once Rand misjudged a driver's whip just by the length of the tip. Clapping his hand to the shallow gash over his eyebrow, he swallowed hard to keep from vomiting at how close it had come to his eye. The driver smirked at him. With his other hand he grabbed Matt to stop him knocking an arrow. "Let it go," he said. He jerked his head at the guards riding alongside the wagons. Some of them were laughing, others gave Matt's bow a hard eye. If we're lucky, they'd just beat us with their spears. If we're lucky. Matt grunted sourly, but he let Rand pull him on down the road. Twice, squadrons of the Queen's guards came trotting down the road, streamers on their lances fluttering in the wind. Some of the farmers hailed them, wanting something done about the strangers, and the guards always paused patiently to listen. Near midday, Rand stopped to listen to one such conversation. Behind the bars of his helmet, the guard captain's mouth was a tight line. "If one of them steals something or trespasses on your land," he growled at the lanky farmer frowning beside his stirrup, "I'll haul him before a magistrate. But they break no Queen's law by walking on the Queen's highway." "But they're all over the place," the farmer protested. "Who knows who they are or what they are? All this talk about the dragon." Light man, you only have a handful here. Caemlyn's walls are bulging with them, and more coming every day." The captain's scowl deepened as he caught sight of Rand and Matt standing in the road nearby. He gestured down the road with a steel-backed gauntlet. "Get on with you, or I'll have you in for blocking traffic." His voice was no rougher with them than with the farmer, but they moved on. The captain's eyes followed them for a time. Rand could feel them on his back. He suspected the guards had little patience left with the wanderers and no sympathy for a hungry thief. He decided to stop Matt if he suggested stealing eggs again. Still, there was a good side to all the wagons and people on the road, especially all the young men heading for Caemlyn. For any Darkfriends hunting them, it would be like trying to pick out two particular pigeons in a flock. If the Merrilin on winter night had not known exactly who it was after, maybe its fellow would do no better here. His stomach rumbled frequently, reminding him that they had next to no money left, certainly not enough for a meal at the prices charged this close to Caemlyn. He realized once he had a hand on the flute case and firmly pushed it around to his back. Gode had known all about the flute and the juggling. There was no telling how much Baal-Alzamon had learned from him before the end, if what Rand had seen had been the end, or how much had been passed to other Darkfriends. He looked regretfully at a farm they were passing. A man patrolled the fences with a pair of dogs, growling and tugging at their leashes. The man looked as if he wanted nothing more than an excuse to let them loose. Not every farm had the dogs out, but no one was offering jobs to travelers. Before the sun went down, he and Matt walked through two more villages. The village folk stood in knots, talking among themselves and watching the steady stream pass by. Their faces were no friendlier than the faces of the farmers, or the wagon drivers, or the Queen's guards. All these strangers going to see the false dragon. Fools who did not know enough to stay where they belonged. Maybe followers of the false dragon. Maybe even Darkfriends. If there was any difference between the two, with evening coming, the stream began to thin at the second town. The few who had money disappeared into the inn, though there seemed to be some argument about letting them inside. Others began hunting for handy hedges or fields with no dogs. By dusk, he and Matt had the Caemlyn road to themselves. Matt began talking about finding another haystack, but Rand insisted on keeping on. "As long as we can see the road," he said. "The further we go before stopping, the further ahead we are. If they are chasing you, why should they chase now when they've been waiting for you to come to them so far?" It was argument enough for Matt. With frequent glances over his shoulder, he quickened his step. Rand had to hurry to keep up. The night thickened, relieved only a bit by scant moonlight. Matt's burst of energy faded, and his complaints started up again. Aching knots formed in Rand's calves. He told himself he had walked further in a hard day working on the farm with Thom, but repeat it as often as he would, he could not make himself believe it. Gritting his teeth, he ignored the aches and pains, and would not stop. With Matt complaining and him concentrating on the next step, they were almost on the village before he saw the lights. He tottered to a stop, suddenly aware of a burning that ran from his feet right up his legs. He thought he had a blister on his right foot. At the sight of the village lights, Matt sagged to his knees with a groan. "Can we stop now?" he panted. "Or do you want to find an inn and hang out a sign for the Darkfriends? Or a fade?" "The other side of the town," Rand answered, staring at the lights. From this distance, in the dark, it could have been Emon's field. What's waiting there? Another mile, that's all. All. I'm not walking another span. Rand's legs felt like fire, but he made himself take a step, and then another. It did not get any easier, but he kept on, one step at a time. Before he had gone 10 paces, he heard Mat staggering after him, muttering under his breath. He thought it was just as well he could not make out what Mat was saying. It was late enough for the streets of the village to be empty, though most houses had a light in at least one window. The inn in the middle of town was brightly lit, surrounded by a golden pool that pushed back the darkness. Music and laughter, dimmed by thick walls, drifted from the building. The sign over the door creaked in the wind. At the near end of the inn, a cart and horse stood in the Caemlyn road, with a man checking the harness. 2 men stood at the far end of the building, on the very edge of the light. Rand stopped in the shadows beside a house that stood dark. He was too tired to hunt through the lanes for a way around. A minute resting could not hurt. Just a minute. Just until the men went away. Mat slumped against the wall with a grateful sigh, leaning back as if he meant to go to sleep right there. Something about the 2 men at the rim of the shadows made Rand uneasy. He could not put a finger on anything at first, but he realized the man at the cart felt the same way about them. He reached the end of the strap he was checking, adjusted the bit in the horse's mouth, then went back and started over from the beginning again. He kept his head down the whole while, his eyes on what he was doing and away from the other men. It could have been that he simply was not aware of them, though they were less than 50 feet off, except for the stiff way he moved and the way he sometimes turned awkwardly in what he was doing, so he would not be looking toward them. One of the men in the shadows was only a black shape, but the other stood more into the light, with his back to Rand. Even so, it was plain he was not overjoyed at the conversation he was having. He wrung his hands and kept his eyes on the ground, jerking his head in a nod now and then at something the other had said. Rand could not hear anything, but he got the impression that the man in the shadows was doing all the talking. The nervous man just listened and nodded and wrung his hands anxiously. Eventually, the one who was wrapped in darkness turned away, and the nervous fellow started back into the light. Despite the chill, he was mopping his face with the long apron he wore, as if he were drenched in sweat. Skin prickling, Rand watched the shape moving off in the night. He did not know why, but his uneasiness seemed to follow that one, a vague tingling in the back of his neck and the hair stirring on his arms, as if he had suddenly realized something was sneaking up on him. With a quick shake of his head, he rubbed his arms briskly. "Getting as foolish as Mat, aren't you?" At that moment, the form slipped by the edge of the light from a window, just on the brink of it, and Rand's skin crawled. The inn sign went scree, scree, scree in the wind, but the dark cloak never stirred. "Fade," he whispered, and Mat jerked to his feet as if he had shouted. "What?" He clamped a hand over Mat's mouth, softly. The dark shape was lost in the darkness. "Where?" "It's gone now, I think. I hope." He took his hand away. The only sound Mat made was a long, indrawn breath. The nervous man was almost to the inn door. He stopped and smoothed down his apron, visibly composing himself before he went inside. "Strange friends you've got, Raymond Holdwyn," the man by the cart said suddenly. It was an old man's voice, but strong. The speaker straightened, shaking his head. Strange friends in the dark for an innkeeper. The nervous man jumped when the other spoke, looking around as if he had not seen the cart and the other man until right then. He drew a deep breath and gathered himself, then asked sharply, "And what do you mean by that, all men bunt?" "Just what I said, Holdwyn. Strange friends. He's not from around here, is he? Lot of odd folk coming through the last few weeks. Awful lot of odd folk. You're a fine one to talk." Holdwyn cocked an eye at the man by the cart. "I know a lot of men, even men from Caemlyn. Not like you, cooped up alone out on that farm of yours." He paused, then went on as if he thought he had to explain further. "He's from 4 Kings, looking for a couple of thieves. Young men. They stole a heron-marked sword from him." Rand's breath had caught at the mention of 4 Kings. At the mention of the sword, he glanced at Mat. His friend had his back pressed hard against the wall and was staring into the darkness with eyes so wide they seemed to be all whites. Rand wanted to stare into the night, too. The halfman could be anywhere, but his eyes went back to the 2 men in front of the inn. "A heron-marked sword," Bunt exclaimed. "No wonder he wants it back." Holdwyn nodded. "Yes, and them too. My friend's a rich man, Bink, a merchant, and they've been stirring up trouble with the men who work for him. telling wild stories and getting people upset. They're Darkfriends and followers of Loghain too. Darkfriends and followers of the false dragon, and telling wild stories too. Getting up to a lot for young fellas. You did say they were young. There was a sudden note of amusement in Bunt's voice, but the innkeeper did not seem to notice. Yes, not yet 20. There's a reward, 100 crowns in gold for the two of them. Holdwyn hesitated, then added, they've sly tongues, these two. The light knows what kind of tales they'll tell, trying to turn people against one another. And dangerous too, even if they don't look it. Vicious. Best you stay clear if you think you see them. Two young men, one with a sword, and both looking over their shoulders. If they're the right ones, my friend will pick them up once they're located. You sound almost as if you know them to look at. I'll know them when I see them, Holdwyn said confidently. Just don't try to take them yourself. No need for anyone to get hurt. Come tell me if you see them. My friend will deal with them. 100 crowns for the two, but he wants the pair. 100 crowns for the two, Bunt mused. How much for this sword he wants so bad? Abruptly, Holdwyn appeared to realize the other man was making fun of him. I don't know why I'm telling you, he snapped. You're still fixed on that fool plan of yours, I see. Not such a fool plan, Bunt replied placidly. There might not be another false dragon to see before I die. Light send it so. And I'm too old to eat some merchant's dust all the way to Caemlyn. I'll have the road to myself, and I'll be in Caemlyn bright and early tomorrow. To yourself? The innkeeper's voice had a nasty quiver. You can never tell what might be out in the night, Almond Bunt. All alone on the road, in the dark. Even if somebody hears you scream, there's no one will unbar a door to help. Not these days, Bunt. Not your nearest neighbour. None of that seemed to ruffle the old farmer at all, he answered as calmly as before. If the Queen's guards can't keep the road safe this close to Caemlyn, then we're none of us safe even in our own beds. If you ask me, one thing the guards could do to make sure the roads are safe would be clap that friend of yours in irons. Sneaking around in the dark, afraid to let anybody get a look at him. Can't tell me he's not up to no good. Afraid, Holdwyn exclaimed. You old fool if you knew. His teeth clicked shut abruptly, and he gave himself a shake. I don't know why I'm wasting time on you. Get off with you. Stop cluttering up the front of my place of business. The door of the inn boomed shut behind him. Muttering to himself, Bunt took hold of the edge of the cart seat and set his foot on the wheel hub. Rand hesitated only a moment. Matt caught his arm as he started forward. Are you crazy, Rand? He'll recognize us for sure. You'd rather stay here. With a fade around? How far do you think we'll get on foot before it finds us? He tried not to think of how far they would get in a cart if it found them. He shook free of Matt and trotted up the road. He carefully held his cloak shut, so the sword was hidden. The wind and the cold were excuse enough for that. I couldn't help overhearing you're going to Caemlyn, he said. Bunt gave a start, jerking a quarterstaff out of the cart. His leathery face was a mass of wrinkles and half his teeth were gone, but his gnarled hands held the staff steady. After a minute he lowered one end of the staff to the ground and leaned on it. So you two are going to Caemlyn. To see the dragon, eh? Rand had not realized that Matt had followed him. Matt was keeping well back, though, out of the light, watching the inn and the old farmer with as much suspicion as he was the knight. The false dragon, Rand said with emphasis. Bunt nodded. Of course. Of course. He threw a sideways look at the inn, then abruptly shoved his staff back under the cart seat. Well, if you want to ride, get in. I've wasted enough time. He was already climbing to the seat. Rand clambered over the back as the farmer flicked the reins. Matt ran to catch up as the cart started off. Rand caught his arms and pulled him aboard. The village faded quickly into the night at the pace Bunt set. Rand lay back on the bare boards, fighting the lulling creak of the wheels. Matt stifled his yawns with a fist, warily staring into the countryside. Darkness weighed heavily on the fields and farms, dotted with the lights of farmhouses. The lights seemed distant, seemed to struggle vainly against the night. An owl called, a mourner's cry, and the wind moaned like lost souls in the shadow. It could be out there anywhere, Rand thought. Bunt seemed to feel the oppression of the night, too, for he suddenly spoke up. You two ever been to Caemlyn before? He gave a little chuckle. Don't suppose you have? Well, wait till you see it. The greatest city in the world. Oh, I've heard all about Ilion and Ebu Dar and Tyr and all. There's always some fool thinks a thing is bigger and better just because it's off somewheres over the horizon. But for my money, Caemlyn is the grandest there is. Couldn't be grander. No, it couldn't. Unless maybe Queen Morgase the Light illumine her, got rid of that witch from Tar Valon. Rand was lying back with his head pillowed on his blanket roll atop the bundle of Thom's cloak, watching the night drift by, letting the farmer's words wash by him. A human voice kept the darkness at bay and muted the mournful wind. He twisted around to look up at the dark mass of Bunt's back. You mean an Aes Sedai? What else would I mean? Sitting there in the palace like a spider. I'm a good queen's man, never say I'm not. But it just isn't right. I'm not one of those saying Elida's got too much influence over the queen. Not me. And as for the fools who claim Elida's really the queen in all but name. He spat into the night. That for them. That for them. Morgase is no puppet to dance for any Tar Valon witch. Another Aes Sedai. If, when Moiraine got to Caemlyn, she might well go to a sister, Aes Sedai. If the worst happened, this Eliada might help them reach Tar Valon. He looked at Mat, and just as if he had spoken aloud, Mat shook his head. He could not see Mat's face, but he knew it was fixed in denial. Bunt went right on talking, flicking the reins whenever his horse slowed, but otherwise letting his hands rest on his knees. I'm a good queen's man, like I said, but even fools say something worthwhile now and again. Even a blind pig finds an acorn sometimes. There's got to be some changes. This weather, the crops failing, cows drying up, calves and lambs born dead or with two heads. Bloody ravens don't even wait for things to die. People are scared. They want somebody to blame. Dragon's fang turning up on people's doors. Things creeping about in the night. Barns getting burned. Fellas around like that friend of Holdwyn, scaring people. The Queen's got to do something before it's too late. You see that, don't you? Rand made a non-committal sound. It sounded as if they had been even luckier than he had thought to find this old man and his cart. They might not have gotten further than that last village if they had waited for daylight. Things creeping about in the night. He lifted up to look over the side of the cart at the darkness. Shadows and shapes seemed to writhe in the black. He dropped back before his imagination convinced him there was something there. Bunt took it for agreement. Right, I'm a good queen's man, and I'll stand against any who try to harm her, but I'm right. You take the Lady Elaine and the Lord Gawain now. There's a change, wouldn't harm anything, and might do some good. Sure, I know we've always done it that way in Andor. Send the daughter heir off to Tar Valon to study with the Aes Sedai, and the eldest son off to study with the Warders. I believe in tradition, I do, but look what it got us last time. Luke, dead in the Blight before he was ever anointed first Prince of the Sword, and Tigraine vanished, run off or dead when it came time for her to take the throne. Still troubling us, that. There's some saying she's still alive, you know, that Morgase isn't the rightful queen. Bloody fools. I remember what happened, remember like it was yesterday. No daughter heir to take the throne when the old queen died, and every house in Andor scheming and fighting for the right. And Terringale Damodred. You wouldn't have thought he'd lost his wife, him hot to figure which house would win, so he could marry again and become prince consort after all. Well, he managed it, though why Morgase chose. Ah, no man knows the mind of a woman, and a queen is twice a woman, wed to a man, wed to the land. He got what he wanted anyway, if not the way he wanted it. Brought Caerhien into the plotting before he was done, and you know how that ended. The tree chopped down, and black-veiled Isle coming over the dragon wall. Well, he got himself decently killed after he'd fathered Elaine and Gawain, so there's an end to it, I suppose. But why send them to Tar Valon? It's time men didn't think of the throne of Andor and Aes Sedai in the same thought anymore. If they've got to go someplace else to learn what they need, well, Ilion's got libraries as good as Tar Valon, and they'll teach the Lady Elaine as much about ruling and scheming as ever the witches could. Nobody knows more about scheming than an Ilioner, and if the guards can't teach the Lord Gawain enough about soldiering, well, they've soldiers in Ilian too, and in Shianar and Tyr for that matter. I'm a good queen's man, but I say let's stop all this truck with Tar Valon. 3,000 years is long enough. Too long. Queen Morgase can lead us and put things right without help from the White Tower. I tell you, there's a woman makes a man proud to kneel for her blessing. Why, once Rand fought the sleep his body cried out for, but the rhythmic creak and sway of the cart lulled him, and he floated off on the drone of Bunt's voice. He dreamed of Tam. At first they were at the big oak table in the farmhouse drinking tea, while Tam told him about prince consorts and daughter heirs and the dragon wall and black-veiled Isleman. The heron-marked sword lay on the table between them, but neither of them looked at it. Suddenly he was in the westward, pulling the makeshift litter through the moon-bright night. When he looked over his shoulder, it was Thom on the litter, not his father, sitting cross-legged and juggling in the moonlight. "The queen is wed to the land," Thom said as brightly coloured balls danced in a circle. "But the dragon is one with the land, and the land is one with the dragon." Further back, Rand saw a fade coming, black cloak, undisturbed by the wind, horse ghosting silently through the trees. Two severed heads hung at the Myrddraal's saddlebow, dripping blood that ran in darker streams down its mount's coal-black shoulder. Lan and Moiraine, faces distorted in grimaces of pain. The fade pulled on a fistful of tethers as it rode. Each tether ran back to the bound wrists of one of those who ran behind the soundless hooves, their faces blank with despair. Mat and Perrin and Egwene. "Not her," Rand shouted. "The light blast you. It's me you want, not her." The halfman gestured, and flames consumed Egwene, flesh crisping to ash, bone blacking and crumbling. "The dragon is one with the land," Thom said, still juddling unconcernedly, "and the land is one with the dragon." Rand screamed and opened his eyes. The cart creaked along the Caemlyn road, filled with night and the sweetness of long-vanished hay and the faint smell of horse. A shape blacker than the night rested on his chest, and eyes blacker than death looked into his. "You are mine," the raven said, and the sharp beak stabbed into his eye. He screamed as it plucked his eyeball out of his head. With a throat-ripping shriek he sat up, clapping both hands to his face. Early morning daylight bathed the cart. Dazed, he stared at his hands. No blood, no pain. The rest of the dream was already fading, but that... Gingerly he felt his face and shuddered. "At least..." Mat yawned, cracking his jaws. "At least you got some sleep?" There was little sympathy in his bleary eyes. He was huddled under his cloak, with his blanket roll doubled up beneath his head. "He talked all bloody night." "You all the way awake?" Bunt said from the driver's seat. "Gave me a start, you did, yelling like that." "Well, we're there." He swept a hand out in front of them in a grand gesture. "Caemlyn, the grandest city in the world.